Each tear that the young girl cried would magically transform into a precious diamond. For this reason, she was kept hidden in a cold and damp basement from her early childhood. Every time her father's business ventures did not succeed, he would go down to see her. After that, he used many different techniques and methods just to make her start crying. Because of this, he became an unstoppable figure in the world of business. It did not matter how many times he lost everything, as he was always able to recover his fortune. When Marcia suddenly awoke from a terrifying nightmare, an enormous number of strange new memories flooded into her mind. The sounds of screaming coming from the basement were particularly vivid, but she clearly remembered that she had just been taking her niece to school a moment before. As the memories combined, Marcia realized that she had been transported into a different world. She had also become the evil older sister of the main heroine in the novel. In the original story, she did not personally torment her sister like her father and brother did, but she frequently ordered her nanny to go and collect all the diamonds. This situation went on for 3 years, until the day that the male lead finally appeared. Every family member who had mistreated Larsa eventually met a very tragic and unhappy end. To confirm if she had truly been transported to this new world, Marcia made the decision to go down to the basement to see things with her own eyes. One of the maids attempted to stop her, saying, "Your leg injury is not yet healed. You should not be walking around so much." Marcia pushed the concerned maid away from her nearly on pure instinct. It was only at that moment that she fully understood what she had just done. Was it possible that the original soul of this body had not disappeared completely yet? "Why are you just standing there doing nothing? You need to leave now." The maid sighed with some relief, gave a quick curtsy, and then she promptly left the room. At this particular moment, Marcia could not be concerned with her own unusual and strange behavior. Using the memories she now had, she went and took the third book from the bookshelf, and exactly as she had been expecting, she discovered a set of hidden keys inside it. Marcia's soul was trembling with a mix of fear and anticipation. The main reason she had always chosen to live on the very top floor of the large castle was so that she could be as far away as she could from the basement where her sister was kept. In the end, she knew she was one of the people responsible for harming Larsa. With a very determined look on her face, Marcia pushed the heavy door open, ignoring the resistance she felt from the other soul inside her. What she saw first were the damp and very old pieces of dilapidated furniture in the room. There was also an awful rotten smell that was very hard to describe. At last, she saw her sister Larsa, who was trembling in the corner of the room. At that particular moment, Marcia's heart was filled with conflicting and powerful emotions. She wondered what kind of father could possibly be this cruel to his own child. How could he treat his own 6-year-old daughter like she was just a source of money? Maybe this was the main reason why the original Marcia had always been so unwilling to visit the basement. However, just as she was thinking this, the devil himself appeared. Her father, a man named Robert, had actually arrived at that very moment. Feeling panicked by his sudden appearance, Marcia did not know what she should say to him. Fortunately for her, it appeared that he was currently in a great hurry to be somewhere else. After they exchanged a few brief and polite words, he quickly guided her out of the room. Marcia felt confused and puzzled by her father's very strange and unusual behavior. Then she heard the distinct sound of a stick striking something just behind her, which was followed by loud shouts of, "You must cry for me! I need you to cry now!" A sudden chill ran down Marcia's spine, and she quickly turned herself around to look. She was just in time to see her father, Robert, swinging the heavy wooden stick. On the cold ground, Larsa was lying face down, her small body trembling with fear. Marcia truly could not restrain her anger any longer. How could such a terrible person exist in the world? At that moment, the clear sound of gems striking the hard floor could be heard nearby. It seemed that Larsa had at last surrendered to the intense pain and had started to cry. Robert was extremely happy about this. His eyes were immediately filled with an intense greed. Behaving like a dog, he got down on the floor and searched carefully, afraid of missing even one diamond. He now had enough money and capital to make yet another financial comeback from his losses. "I am leaving now. Make sure you don't overdo it either." He clearly believed Marcia was exactly like him. She was watching the nanny carefully treat the wounds that were on Larsa's small body. The strong desire to leave this terrible home grew even more powerful inside Marcia's mind. But what should she do about her sister, who was right there? Should she really allow her to be tortured for 3 more years? She felt completely powerless. Marcia was in a very bad mood. She felt so bad that she did not even see the maids who were walking toward her. "We are so sorry. We are very sorry, miss. We truly did not mean to do that." Marcia could feel a powerful surge of anger that was rising up from deep inside her, but her sense of reason finally won, and she did not get angry. Yet her forgiveness caused the maids to start whispering among themselves. And what was even more unbelievable to her was the fact that she was actually able to hear all of their thoughts, even though they were standing very far away. What was happening to her? At that exact moment, a very handsome man suddenly burst into the large house. This man was Marcia's older brother, Roger. He was handsome, but he was also a serious gambler. The two siblings had an extremely poor relationship. What are you staring at? Can you even greet your own brother when you see him? Just forget it. I don't consider a gambler my brother. That is ridiculous. Compared to our father, who always loses money, don't he? I have a much better chance winning at gambling. After he said that, Roger then announced that he was planning to go visit his dear little sister. Marcia knew that Larsa was about to be beaten once again, and she could not hold back her anger anymore. She could not stop herself from saying sarcastically, "Did our mother give you that ability to never get drunk just so you could spend all your time in casinos?" It was revealed the three siblings' mother had been an elf, which explained why her children awakened unique powers. So far, only Marcia did not yet know what her own special ability was. Feeling enraged, Roger was about to hit her, but then he thought again and realized it was more profitable for him to go and get some diamonds. He suddenly felt someone pulling on him from somewhere behind, and he could not take it any longer. He was about to teach Marcia a very harsh lesson. "Are you really trying to destroy the only source of our family's great wealth? Our father was just down there. If you go there again right now, she will definitely die." After saying this, Marcia removed her most valuable earring. "Here, take this. This should be enough money for you for a short while." Her brother, Roger, took the valuable earring and then finally stopped bothering her about the issue. Marcia patted her own chest, feeling a lingering sense of fear. She had almost been struck by him. For the whole rest of the afternoon, Marcia was unable to think of a truly perfect solution. At this time, her single hope was for the male lead to show up soon. If that were so, would it not be equally effective if she took Larsa to go find him herself? Having finally decided on a plan of action, Marcia started to search the library for any useful information she could find about this world. To her great annoyance, she was not able to find anyone who perfectly fit the description. That was the case until a very familiar-looking family crest managed to catch her eye. That is it. This young man, who was named Fabian Laurent, had to be the male lead. Now everything she needed was prepared. All that she had to do was wait for her injured leg to fully heal. 4 days after that, the original owner's soul finally vanished completely, and Marcia at last understood what her own special and unique ability was. Her ability was telepathy, but it was unfortunately limited to hearing only negative and bad thoughts. It was no wonder the original Marcia had been so unwilling to interact with other people. However, this power was actually very helpful for her own escape plan. That same night, Marcia went down to the basement by herself, bringing some cookies with her. She noticed that Larsa was trembling with fear. She made sure to keep her distance from her and said in a gentle voice, "I do not mean you any harm. If it is all right with you, could you please show me your face for a moment?" After she confirmed that there was no immediate danger, Larsa finally peeked her small head out from her hiding spot. Marcia's heart softened, and she started to carefully communicate with her. However, Larsa continued to remain silent. It appeared that her psychological trauma was extremely severe. Luckily for them, she was still able to nod her head to express her desires. Because of this, Marcia first used the delicious cookies to start to win her over, and then she squatted down to her level and told her all about her secret escape plan. Very early the next morning, Marcia intentionally messed up her own hair and then let out a terrifying, loud scream. Her own personal maid quickly rushed upstairs to see what was wrong, but she was met with a torrent of scolding. "How did my favorite dress get torn? Was this your doing?" "I am very sorry. I am so sorry. It truly was not me who did this. Go and get a carriage for me. I am taking this dress to the local tailoress shop to have it mended myself, and as your punishment, you are not allowed to call for any other help." With that action, Marcia had successfully completed the first step of her detailed plan. Since it was very early, The carriage arrived without waking anyone else up. Even if somebody were to bring this incident up later on, her earlier performance would buy her a lot of valuable time. In the meantime, the female owner of the local tailor shop had only just woken up from her sleep when a very unexpected visitor suddenly arrived at her door. "I have some torn clothing that needs to be mended. The price is not an issue, but it must be done very quickly. Also, you can go back ahead of me. I will just wander around the city for a little while and then return on my own." After the servant had finally departed, Larsa suddenly became extremely emotional in her behavior. She then told a lie, claiming to the owner that she had run away from her home to escape an arranged marriage. The shop owner instinctively leaned back from her. What did any of this have to do with her business? But then Larsa suddenly knelt down on the ground and started begging for her help. "Help me call a carriage from the back door, and please give me a set of your old clothes." Looking down at the very heavy gold coins now in her hand, the shop owner ultimately could not resist the strong temptation. She even ended up giving her the most worn out and ragged clothes that she had in her shop. After she had changed from one carriage to another a total of 5 times, Marcia quietly exited the carriage in a very remote forest. She felt worried that any more of a delay would be too difficult for Larsa to handle. But when she finally opened the large travel trunk, she found her sister's eyes were completely vacant, showing no signs of any discomfort or making any complaints. The more that she looked at her very well-behaved younger sister, the more she grew to like her. She even took off her own personal sun hat and gave it to her sister to wear. Luckily for them both, Marcia had already planned everything out well ahead of time. The location where they got out was not very far from a small town. Just one day of walking would get them to the male lead's Laurent family estate. Or just tell me what you would like to eat. Here is the menu. Seeing Larsa stay silent as if she was deaf, Marcia felt a sudden and sharp sting in her nose from holding back tears. "Do not worry. Once we finally get to the Laurent family's home, you will not have to worry about anything for the rest of your life. You will have a lot to eat and drink, and you will have someone who is going to love you forever." Mumbling this to herself, Marcia did not see that someone was watching her. This person had a pair of very rare and striking red eyes. When Marcia finally turned around, he had already looked away from her. However, even that very quick and brief glimpse was more than enough to completely shock her. Even though the strange man's clothes were quite shabby, he was still incredibly handsome to look at, not appearing any less attractive even when compared to her brother with his elven blood. How dare she run away with my source of money? I will definitely not let her get away this time. Thanks to her special ability, Marcia was able to sense her father's arrival ahead of time. In this very critical moment, she had absolutely no time left to think. She quickly pulled her sister Larsa with her, and they hid underneath the table. Now, the only thing she could do was pray that the man sitting at the next table would not betray their location. However, the very thing she was afraid of happened. Robert walked directly over to the mysterious man to ask him a question. Upon hearing that demonic-sounding voice, Larsa suddenly became extremely nervous and very scared. But there was absolutely nothing that Marcia could do to help. Just as she believed it was all over for them, the mysterious man said, "I have not seen the 2 people you are talking about. It is possible that they left this place a very long time ago." After hearing him say this, Marcia and her sister Larsa finally breathed a huge sigh of relief. But at this moment, a waiter came to their table, carrying the food they had ordered. Marcia could faintly hear his thoughts. What kind of people are they? They order food and then they just leave. At that moment, the man spoke up again. "Just put those dishes aside for right now. We will get to them after we are finished with our meal." Robert immediately became very suspicious of this and started to question the man more intensely. "We are big guys here. What is so wrong with us ordering a few extra dishes to eat, with another person paying for it?" The waiter was, of course, very happy to agree, and he quickly said, "Indeed, these are the 2 gentlemen's dishes." The anxious Robert did not want to waste any more of his time there. Marcia patiently waited until she was sure her father had gone before coming out with her sister. She wanted to properly thank the mysterious man, but he told her there was no need. "I was just afraid that your commotion would end up ruining my appetite." Faced with such a very strange and unusual person, Marcia decided to give up on trying to have a conversation with him. Fearing that their father might come back, the 2 sisters took only a few quick bites of their food and then prepared to leave. She thought that walking on a very crowded street would be much safer for them. Still, Marcia used her special ability at its full strength just in case. And quite unexpectedly, She happened to actually overhear a very dangerous and important secret. It will only take one stab. And then I am gone. After that, I will never have to go hungry ever again. A person's life was in danger. Marcia knew she could not just stand by and decide to do nothing about it. Very soon after, she locked her eyes onto a small and suspicious-looking little boy in the crowd. Coincidentally, the boy's target was the same mysterious man who had helped her before. And from the way they were talking, the man was completely off his guard. If she decided not to intervene right now, the kid might actually succeed. Hey, you little guy who is wearing the hat, come over here for a second. The young boy's facial expression changed, as he thought that his plan had been exposed. But Marcia did not point his plan out to him. She instead just gave him 2 valuable gold coins. And then she added a light scolding to her actions. Where are your manners? Don't you know you should receive things with both of your hands? Feeling the many eyes that were now on his back, the boy knew that he could not possibly succeed now. It is all of that ugly woman's fault. I was even planning to get rid of this kid too after the job was done. Marcia suddenly turned herself back around to look, but she was not able to see anything there. It seemed that this little boy was nothing more than a pawn in a much larger game. Because she had performed this very good deed, Marcia ended up arriving at the train station a little bit late. The ticket seller impatiently informed her that all of the tickets had been sold out just as she was trying very hard to think of another way to travel. The mysterious man suddenly appeared and invited her to travel along with them. Afraid that he might have other motives, Marcia naturally did not dare to agree. However, when she found out that they were thanking her for what she had done in the town square, and after hearing no other evil or malicious thoughts from them, Marcia finally agreed to their offer. As the large train slowly began to move from the station, the 2 sisters had finally, for a time, escaped the terrible chains of their cruel fate. After that, they all introduced themselves to one another. The man wearing glasses, named Pratt, was an assistant. Next to him was his young master, Arno. He faced the peculiar girl who was staring at him. Arno asked her a little bit awkwardly, "Why do you keep staring at me like that?" Marcia gave him an awkward, closed-mouth smile and then said in a casual tone, "You are just very handsome." But deep down inside, she knew that she still could not bring herself to completely trust him. But then Arno's expression suddenly turned very serious. "May I be bold enough to ask you why you are going to the Grand Duke's official residence?" Marcia was very startled by his question. How could he possibly know that information? When she found out that she had accidentally let it slip back at the restaurant, Marcia had no other choice but to admit the truth. Arno continued to press her. "You still have not told me your reason why." "Because my sister, Larissa, is destined to become the Grand Duke's future wife." For some unknown reason, Arno suddenly burst into loud and unrestrained laughter. Marcia chose to ignore his strange behavior, as she was only concerned if her sister Larsa was feeling unwell. However, her sister's reaction was still a frighteningly cold and distant one. It could only be said that she had not yet opened up her very closed-off heart. Pratt then asked with concern, "Has your sister suffered some kind of serious psychological trauma?" Marcia did not want to say very much about it, so she only replied, "She will be fine once she finally meets His Grace, the Grand Duke." After all, that is exactly how the happy ending always goes in all the fairy tales. Sitting beside her, Arno suddenly felt a strong and unexpected pang of his conscience. He offered a sincere apology, and then said that he would personally take both of them to the Laurent family estate. Even though Marcia did not really believe him, she still smiled and expressed her sincere thanks. However, just as the train was pulling into the station, she saw a large carriage that was bearing the Laurent family's crest. Still in a daze, they quickly arrived at their final destination. This was the famous home of the male lead from the novel. She looked at all the maids lining the path to welcome their arrival. Marcia thought to herself, he could not possibly be the legendary Grand Duke himself, could he? But isn't the actual male lead's name supposed to be Fabian, not Arno? In any case, Marcia felt like she wanted to jump into a river at that moment, so she could not help asking Pratt about Arno's true identity. But Pratt simply replied to her that Arno was not actually the Grand Duke. Feeling very relieved by this news, Marcia went ahead and entered the large reception hall. A servant bowed deeply and said to them with a welcoming smile, "His Grace, the Grand Duke, will be arriving here very shortly." Thinking that her beloved sister would soon be able to find her own happiness, Marcia could not help but show a fond and knowing smile on her face. She was even in the mood to taste the delicious cookies offered here. However, when the actual Grand Duke finally made his appearance, she was completely stunned and shocked. Her sister's fated and destined true love was, in fact, a very old man. But based on her research, the male lead was certainly the Grand Duke of the Laurent family. Marcia had to test the situation by calling out, "Are you Grand Duke Fabian?" The old man did not give her an answer, and he instead merely ordered his subordinate to go and call Fabian over to them. Seeing this happen, Marcia finally breathed a huge sigh of relief. When she finally saw the familiar and very handsome man who had the striking red eyes, she exclaimed to him in complete shock, "Didn't you tell me that your name was Arno?" "Actually, my full name is Fabian. I only use the name Arno when I am traveling." Marcia froze right where she was standing. So he was her sister's true love after all. It was just that because the old Grand Duke was still alive, Fabian had not yet officially inherited the prestigious title of Grand Duke. Perhaps feeling a bit unwell, the old Grand Duke chatted for a little while, and then he left. "Did you intentionally not tell us what your real name was from the start?" Fabian smiled at her and then nodded his head. "After all, I was also afraid that you might have some bad intentions towards the duchy." Even though what he said did make a lot of sense, Marcia was still a little bit angry. But for her sister's future happiness, she decided to endure it. For some particular reason, Marcia suddenly felt that the atmosphere in the room was a bit strange. What exactly did they mean by staring at her in that particular and intense way? And judging from the look on Fabian's own face, this was certainly not love at first sight. Marcia suddenly came to the realization that she might have arrived here far too early in the timeline. But if she had not decided to do this, Larsa would have needed to endure 3 more long years of suffering and darkness. At that exact moment, Marcia finally made up her mind. If her father would not take care of his daughter, then she would do it herself. "Your leg injury has not healed yet, has it? You can stay here with us for a few days before you decide to leave." Marcia had not expected that he would ask her to stay with them for a while. "Do not overthink my offer. I simply do not want to see you get captured by some bad people out there." After he finished saying that to her, Fabian turned and looked over at Larsa, and an idea flashed through Marcia's mind. Could this be a type of love that was born from pity? But in the next second, Fabian's inner thoughts came through. This child is so pitiful to have such a strange older sister. And so, the two sisters had found a new place to stay for that night. After she lulled Larsa to sleep, Marcia's own mind started to wander, and she began to think about many different things. If Fabian is so close to inheriting the title, then his grandfather must be in some kind of danger. Just at that moment, a loud commotion was heard from outside her door. Pressing her ear against the door, Marcia faintly heard someone shouting for a doctor. In the meantime, the Grand Duke had fallen into a deep coma. Even though Fabian immediately brought a doctor to see him, it was not very effective. What was even more annoying to him was the fact that his uncle's family had also arrived at the estate. They had never shown any respect for their family. They were all just waiting for the chance to inherit the entire estate. They even cursed at Fabian, calling him an unsightly bastard child who was picked up from the streets. His aunt was even more direct, saying, "Only my husband is able to inherit the family fortune." She had even brought her only daughter with her to try and gain favor with the old man. But Eloise, it appeared, was quite obsessed with physical looks, and she had actually started to develop some romantic ideas about her cousin, Fabian. At that moment, the family's lawyer suddenly announced that the Grand Duke had drafted a brand new will. This news made the Uncle's family's expressions change dramatically. They all had a very bad feeling in their hearts, so they immediately called for their youngest son, Richard. "You are just in time, my dear cousin. You must have somehow bewitched our grandfather into changing his will. I will not let you get away with doing this. You should get it all out of your system now, or you will not have another chance to do so." That very same night, the old Grand Duke of the Laurent family passed away. However, it seemed that his family only cared about the contents of his final will. As the official notary began to read the full contents of the Grand Duke's will aloud, the members of the uncle's family all looked exceptionally grim and unhappy about this. And a moment later, their very worst fears were finally confirmed and came true. The old Grand Duke had, in fact, decided to leave the entire family inheritance to Fabian. Of course, this came with one condition. He was required to marry and have a child. All within 1 year. Unwilling to accept this outcome, the uncle shot up from his seat in anger. Fabian, having already expected this, simply sidestepped him. Eloise saw her father fall to the ground in a pathetic and undignified heap. Eloise then actually volunteered herself for the role, saying to Fabian, "Let us get married." This shocking statement nearly made her own mother faint with pure rage and frustration. Fabian felt a headache coming on. This family truly deserves to die. In reality, Fabian's own mother had been a witch, which is the real reason why Fabian has a pair of red eyes. And the primary reason that he wanted to take the title of Grand Duke for himself was so that he could completely destroy this entire filthy and corrupted family. But before he could do that, he first needed to complete the old Grand Duke's final task, to secure his own position. His loyal assistant, Pratt, suggested that it would be safest to find a person who poses absolutely no threat. And as it happens, we have such a person right here in this manor. The clear image of the young woman Marcia could not help but appear in Fabian's mind. The very next day, he went and proposed to Marcia. "My dear Miss Marcia, would you do me the great honor of becoming my wife?" Marcia's face turned completely pale as she suddenly shouted out, "There is no way." Fabian smiled at her response. He said, "You said no way, not I, do not want to." Seeing that she was still very unwilling to agree to his proposal, Fabian then tried to tempt her with the promise of great wealth and a splendid lifestyle, saying that even if she were to damage the reputation of the Grand Duchess after they married, it would not matter at all. Marcia was certainly not a fool. She immediately asked him what his true and real objective was. When she finally learned that Fabian was only doing all of this to fulfill his grandfather's final task and to secure his new title, Marcia fell into a very deep thought. According to the original fairy tale, his wife was supposed to be her own younger sister, Larsa, but to escape from their father's control, they had met 3 years too early. Thinking of this, Marcia could not help asking, "Can I divorce you at any time I want in the future?" Fabian was overjoyed by this, and said to her, with a wide smile, "Anytime you want to, after 1 year has passed." In reality, Marcia's idea for this whole situation was quite simple and straightforward. Since the two sisters were at a dead end, she could secure the male lead for 3 years and then return him to her dear sister. It was a perfect plan that would serve both of their purposes very well. Of course, she did not agree to the plan right away. Before she did that, Marcia first had to ask for Larsa's personal opinion. For some particular reason, every single time that she saw her younger sister, she could always see the faint shadow of her beloved niece from her own past life in her. "My dear sister, do you have that feeling of love at first sight for Lord Fabian?" Unfortunately, Larsa, who had sealed her heart away long ago, could not speak at all. Or perhaps she was simply too afraid of the outside world to speak. Even so, Marcia went on and told her about her new plan. At that moment, she noticed that her sister was tightly clutching something small in her hand. So she kindly asked her sister, "What is that you have in your hand? Do you need me to help you wash it for you?" But Larsa still did not show any kind of reaction. Not wanting to force her, Marcia decided she would leave the room first. But then, Larsa did something uncharacteristic and opened up her hands to show what she held. Marcia was deeply shaken by what she saw. Wasn't this the same handkerchief she had given to her? It turned out that without Marcia even realizing it, Larsa had started to see her as her one and only source of support. Marcia's nose began to feel sore, and she suddenly felt like she was about to start crying. She went forward and gave her little sister a very tight hug. She swore that she would never let anyone hurt her sister, ever again. The very next day, just as she had promised that she would, Marcia went to find Fabian and presented him with a detailed marriage contract she had written. The majority of the clauses in the contract were about ensuring the protection of her sister Larsa. And, of course, the most important clause for her was that there would be no physical contact with her. She did not want to accidentally ruin her sister's future happiness. If you have any of your own conditions, you can write them down as well. Fabian then reached over and picked up the quill pen from the desk, and then he started to write on the document with a distinct scratchy sound. Just as she had expected, his conditions for the contract were unusually lenient and simple. "Actually, you do not need to worry, because I am planning on adopting a child when the right time finally comes for that." Marcia felt a little bit awkward. This man really did not pull any of his punches. Indeed, underneath his handsome appearance was a very deep and calculating mind. After the two of them had both agreed upon all the terms of the contract, Fabian slowly stood up from his chair and then finally performed a very formal and respectful knight bow. "My beautiful Miss Marcia. So then, will you please agree to be my wife?" Even though she knew this was all just an act, Marcia's heart still managed to skip a beat. Looking at the large pigeon-s egg-sized diamond ring, she was once again reminded of Larsa's painful tears. So for the sake of her beloved sister, she very gladly said the words, "I do." According to what Fabian told her, this ring was passed down through many generations of grand duchesses. Quite miraculously, the overall size of the beautiful ring was a completely perfect fit for her hand. This feeling, as if it were custom-made just for her, felt truly magical and special. After that, Fabian called for his assistant Pratt, and he drafted an official document to the royal family to request their permission for the marriage. As long as he was able to return with the official royal seal within 3 days, Marcia would become the legal mistress of the Grand Duke's entire household. However, Fabian also gave her a warning that these next 3 days would be exceptionally dangerous for both of them. So it would be for the best if you and your sister do not leave the safety of the manor. After all, there are too many people in this family who do not want me to become the Grand Duke. The next few days were very calm and quite pleasant. Every single day, Marcia would read different fairy tales aloud to her sister Larsa. She truly hoped that all of these beautiful stories would finally help to open her sister's closed-off heart. At that moment, Marcia suddenly heard some very unpleasant thoughts coming from somewhere nearby in the house. Honestly, she acts like she is a young master every single day, and she expects to be served just like a lord. How did this little brat end up staying in the main guest room of all places? Marcia suddenly had a very bad feeling about this. She quickly hid Larsa away safely in the room. "Please be a good girl, sister. I have to go take care of something, and I will be right back." Then a set of footsteps approached the door. Just as she had expected, Fabian's younger cousin Richard came to the room looking for them. He first took a moment to look all around the room, and then he said in a very unfriendly tone, "You can leave this place now." Marcia's smiling face instantly became very stiff. When she heard him claim to be the Grand Duke Laurent's grandson, she sneered at him. "As far as I know, Fabian is the Grand Duke's actual grandson." Hearing her say this, Richard flew into a great rage, yelling, "How is that witch's spawn even worthy of the title?" It was only at that moment that Marcia finally remembered his true identity in the family. In the meantime, Richard was getting very close to completely losing his temper with her. "Is anyone really daring to provoke me right now?" Marcia felt helpless against this type of spoiled brat. All she wanted at this moment was for him to leave quickly. However, Richard then noticed that there were 2 sets of tableware sitting on the nearby table. Marcia did not want to reveal Larsa's presence in the room, and she felt very annoyed by his snooping. What was even more infuriating to her was the fact that he shamelessly refused to leave the room. At that exact moment, there was a small and sudden sound coming from behind her. The tyrannical Richard suddenly felt as if his heart had stopped beating. Marcia saw her sister peek out from behind her, and Marcia quickly went over to her and asked, "Were you feeling scared, being in this room all by yourself?" She saw Richard, who was now asking for her younger sister's name. Marcia, feeling protective, quickly stood in front of her sister. She had no good feelings at all towards this spoiled brat, and naturally she did not want him getting close to her precious sister. She casually made up an excuse, saying her sister had a cold and was not feeling well. But Richard persistently insisted that he could call a doctor for her if she was sick. Even though Marcia tried her very best to stand and block his view of her sister, Richard still managed to get a few very good looks at Larsa. Indeed, for every single person, there is someone who can finally tame them. The arrogant and insufferable Richard had completely fallen in love with her. Marcia thought her interference would make him give up, but soon after, a maid delivered an invitation from Richard. It turned out that he wanted to invite both of the sisters to a formal dinner party the very next day. Regarding this invitation, Marcia naturally had to go and ask for Fabian's own opinion on the matter, but he nonchalantly told her, "If you do not want to go to the party, then do not force yourself to attend." But Marcia felt worried that Richard would be very persistent. What if he decided to come looking for them directly and then started to harass Larsa? Hearing her concern, Fabian said to her bluntly, "Why didn't we just change your rooms then?" When she found out that Fabian would also be attending the dinner, Marcia immediately changed her tune. "It is fine. You will be there to protect me, right?" Fabian just stared at her for a very long time, without saying a single word in reply. "Do not worry. Once the official marriage certificate arrives in a few days, you will be safe here." The only thing that made her feel awkward was that, it seemed, she did not have even one formal gown to wear for the event. Unexpectedly, that same afternoon, Fabian had someone deliver a large pile of gifts. On the surface, it was presented as an apology for the poor hospitality she had received these past few days. However, Marcia knew that he was really just trying to help her save face for the dinner party. Of course, the very first person that she thought of when she saw all the nice things was Larsa. And looking at the clothes material, it was obvious they were all top-quality items. However, something she did not expect was that Richard had also sent over a large pile of gift boxes for them. When Marcia finally opened them up, she felt a sharp pain in her heart. This brat's sense of taste is truly awful. To think that he actually wants my dear Larsa to wear such tacky and tasteless-looking clothes. She threw all of them aside without a moment's hesitation, and then she dressed her sister in the beautiful clothes that Fabian had sent. Now, this is what a truly lovely and young noble lady should look like. Larsa, I hope that you can have more nice things that belong only to you, and I hope that one day you can cry and laugh just like a normal child does. But there is absolutely no need for you to rush. I will always be here with you as you slowly adjust. After all of Marcia's long-term and patient care, a small glimmer of life finally appeared in Larsa's eyes. As a young child, to escape the pain of her father's daily beatings, she had chosen to completely seal off her own heart. But during these past few days, she could feel the warmth and call of the outside world, coming from a very kind and caring older sister named Marcia. But she did not understand the reason why this person was being so incredibly good to her. Perhaps one day when she finally figures it out, she will also be able to speak. For the Laurent family dinner that night, Marcia ultimately chose to leave Larsa behind and attend the event, all by herself. She was completely unwilling to let her beloved sister suffer even the smallest amount of potential danger. Having done all of her important homework about the family beforehand, she easily recognized the person who was sitting next to her as Fabian's beautiful cousin, Eloise. Just then, someone slammed their hand down hard on the table. "Didn't he? I invite both of you to this dinner. Why did Larsa not come with you?" Marcia was completely speechless. This little brat had actually slicked his hair back to try and look more mature. Richard's loud and sudden outburst quickly caught his own mother's undivided attention. "Who is this girl here?" Her very plain clothes really seemed to suit Fabian quite well. Richard just stammered his words, as he did not know how he should properly describe her. Marcia took this opportunity to introduce herself to the table. "I am just a distant cousin of Lord Fabian." "So you are not very close, then? Do you think it is appropriate for you to attend a Laurent family dinner? As if I am very close with you either?" Fabian's sudden interjection startled his cousin Eloise. Marcia noticed his glance, which was telling her to just eat in peace. Marcia smiled to herself. It felt very great to have someone here who was looking out for her. But very soon after that, she found she could not take it anymore. The minds of this particular group of people were filled with absolutely nothing but negative and malicious thoughts. So Marcia simply decided to pretend to be sick, and then she coughed a few times, which, just as she expected, earned her a very disgusted look from Eloise, who was sitting next to her. With this excuse, she was able to escape the very boring banquet. The mere thought of having to spend 3 whole years with these terrible people was more than enough to drive her completely crazy. Nothing can possibly go wrong. I must give the dessert that is on the left to the young Master Fabian. Why do I have to do this awful thing? What if I end up getting implicated? In that single instant, countless thoughts flashed through Marcia's mind, especially about Fabian's aunt. There was clearly something very wrong with her gaze, so she deliberately bumped into the passing maid with a lot of force. The delicious-looking desserts that were on the tray immediately scattered all over the hard wooden floor. Seeing Fabian himself bend down to help her get up from the floor, she immediately took the opportunity as she was getting up to warn him. "Someone here is trying to harm you. From now on, do not eat any more food." Fabian remained completely expressionless, and he only told her to go back to her room and rest. Well, as he was watching the maid who was cleaning up the mess, His eyes turned very sharp. And he thought to himself with a cold resolve, "These people truly do not deserve to live." It was a very gloomy and rainy day, the day of Grand Duke Laurent's funeral. Since Marcia had accepted Fabian's marriage proposal, she was naturally considered a part of the Laurent family, but the other family members did not know this yet. Eloise even mocked her, asking if she was trying to climb the social ladder by getting with her cousin, Fabian. Only young Richard was the one who showed her even a small trace of kindness and respect. Marcia happily stood up from her seat in order to greet him properly, but Richard was just absent-mindedly looking all around the room for someone else. She laughed and asked him, "Are you looking for my sister, Larsa?" Her guess about his thoughts made Richard's face turn bright red. He strongly denied it while he was fleeing in embarrassment. Now Marcia found herself bored once again. At that exact moment, she happened to notice Fabian standing over in the crowd of people, and it looked to her like he was on very good terms with a handsome red-haired man. Marcia, who had been about to go over and say hello to him, had to stop herself. As the formal funeral service officially began for the late Grand Duke, she respectfully offered her flowers. "Hello, Grandpa Duke. I am your granddaughter-in-law by proxy. I truly hope that you can now rest in peace." After the official ceremony was over, Marcia was having some tea in the designated rest area. But all of the negative thoughts coming from all around her were just far too noisy. Feeling helpless, she had to go out onto the balcony to get some fresh air. Unexpectedly, Fabian himself came out looking for her. Marcia had only just said a few words to him when she suddenly heard the terrifying sound of a gunshot. In just a single instant, both of her hands were completely covered in warm, wet blood. Fabian staggered backward a few steps from the force of the impact. After he steadied himself just a little bit, he quickly pulled out his own gun, and then turned around. Before Marcia even had a chance to react, she heard a quick series of gunshots. And, of course, she also heard the villain's inner voice as he was hit. "Damn it all, I have been hit. How did he manage to find me so quickly?" Marcia had intended to take Fabian somewhere to get his serious wounds treated by a doctor. But with a very sudden turn, he then jumped down from the third-floor balcony. At that moment, the red-haired man came over to her, introduced himself as Leonard, and chuckled. "Do not worry, that guy is much tougher than a rock." Before Marcia could even say a word, she felt a sharp pain in her head. "Damn it, I am going to die. I knew I should not have taken this mission." Overwhelmed by the malicious thought, Marcia fainted on the spot. When she finally woke up once again, she found that she was safely back in her own room. The shocking scenes of what had happened just before she fainted flashed through her mind. She quickly asked the maid who was there, "How is Mr. Fabian doing now?" The maid comforted her by saying, "The Grand Duke is safe. I heard the assassin later committed suicide." Marcia was still very shaken by the earlier mental attack. So the resentment that a person feels right before their death is this powerful. But why was it that I did not hear any of his thoughts before the attack? Finally, Marcia came to a logical conclusion. He was a professional killer, which is why he had no malicious thoughts of his own before acting. As her mind was racing with these thoughts, Fabian walked in. "You are finally awake, my lady." Marcia broke out in a cold sweat. What was he up to? Acting so gentle. "I have some very good news that I would like to tell you right now." After he finished speaking to her, Fabian turned just slightly to his side, which revealed that his trusted assistant, Pratt, had finally returned from his trip. Of course, this also meant that their official marriage certificate had finally arrived. Fabian immediately went and announced the news to everyone in the household. His uncle and aunt, of course, completely refused to believe that someone would willingly marry the son of a witch and become his wife. But the more furious and exasperated that they all became, the happier Fabian himself was. "My sincere apologies, but this woman here is my new wife, Miss Marcia." Upon hearing these words, Eloise, who was deeply infatuated with him, turned completely pale with rage. "That bitch actually went and stole my rightful position as the Grand Duchess?" Meanwhile, the notary for the grandfather's will also arrived and announced that from this moment on, Fabian was the Grand Duke of the Laurent family. At that exact moment, Marcia heard yet another negative voice from somewhere in the room. What a complete idiot! If he had only just sent a few more assassins, this would never have happened. Just as Marcia was about to give Fabian a very important warning, Fabian himself spoke up. "Uncle, Aunt, please leave my residence immediately. Of course, before you do, please clear yourselves of the charge of murdering my grandfather." Having said his piece, Fabian did not want to linger and argue with them any longer. The household guards would naturally come and escort the two of them out. After leaving the hall, Marcia called out anxiously, "Wait, please wait a moment. Didn't you explicitly state in our signed contract that you would not touch me at all?" Fabian looked completely bewildered. "Not even holding hands?" Marcia lowered her head and mumbled, "No. Then what about when I held you earlier? We will eventually run into situations like that." Marcia hesitated for a moment. He certainly did have a very good point about that. "If you still have some doubts about this, let us define the exact boundaries of physical contact. As long as we do not touch each other during our marital duties at night, it should be fine." Such incredibly audacious words were too much for her. Marcia was completely unable to handle it. Meanwhile, the uncle was taken away as a suspect, but Eloise and Richard were not implicated. However, Eloise could not just swallow the bitter pill of seeing the man she loved falling for someone else. She tried to get Richard to join her in stirring up some more trouble for the new couple. "If Fabian manages to have an heir, you will never be able to become the Grand Duke yourself." But to her great surprise, Richard claimed he had no interest in the title of Grand Duke. Of course, he would not be leaving either. After all, there was a girl here who held a fatal attraction for him. For Marcia, her new life as a Grand Duchess was not an easy one at all. Every single day brought a countless number of invitations to various different social events. Because she was afraid of offending important people, Marcia did not dare to throw them all away. When she learned that her new husband, Fabian, was not very busy today, she decided to show him the invitations for his review. After all, he had just become the Grand Duke, so it was always right to be very cautious. Marcia very cautiously approached him as he was working at his desk, and she happened to notice that he had two distinct hair whorls on the top of his head. She had heard that people with this particular trait usually get married twice. Just then, Fabian noticed Marcia standing so close. "My lady, is there something that I can help you with? These are all the invitations I have received recently, so I wanted you to see if there are any that require special attention in replying to them. After all, our marriage is only an act, and I am very afraid of messing up your important affairs." "Please do not say that. You can enjoy all of the rights and privileges of a Grand Duchess." Hearing him say this, Marcia said excitedly, "Really? I only have one request, and that is to get a different type of doctor for Larsa." In truth, the Dr. Fabian had arranged for Larsa was already very good, but Larsa's wounds were mainly psychological in nature. Marcia wanted to find a professional psychologist for her. To her great surprise, Fabian then said, "I have never seen a doctor who is able to heal the mind." Marcia felt a little bit dejected by his answer. Had the medical arts of this world not advanced that far yet? To be able to heal the mind? Perhaps only a witch might have a slight chance of doing that. Overhearing his thoughts, Marcia knew he hated witches, so she decided to ask someone else when she had the chance. At that moment, Fabian suddenly asked her a question. "Are you trying to hide something from me?" Marcia's heart pounded in her chest, as she was thinking her sister's big secret had been exposed. She could only say to him, in a vague way, "No, you are just overthinking things. You do not need to be so nervous. I was just curious if Larsa had been abused by someone." After hearing him say this, Marcia breathed a big sigh of relief. She had been prepared for this specific question. After getting her confirmation, Fabian said grimly, "Do you need me to go and take care of the source of this trouble for you?" Marcia's facial expression changed drastically. He was talking about going and killing someone for her, even though she did not care at all about the lives of her so-called father and brother in this particular world. The original owner of this body had once ordered the nanny to help her extract some of Larsa's valuable tears. If they were counting all of the culprits, she would be counted as one of them too. At this thought, Marcia quickly waved her hands, and she refused his generous offer, saying, "You just need to promise me not to reveal Larsa's current whereabouts to anyone." Fabian, of course, did not refuse this very simple and reasonable request she had made. Marcia did not want to continue talking about this particular topic any longer, so she quickly asked him, "How are the injuries you sustained doing now? You would not have gotten hurt if it were not for protecting me." Fabian thought his new wife was feeling guilty, so he simply undid his tie and his shirt buttons. "I am really fine now. If you do not believe me, you can see for yourself." Marcia's face instantly turned as red as a ripe apple from his forward actions. "Please do not do that. I was just asking you out of some simple concern. After this awkward incident, Marcia could not stay there any longer. She could not wait to go back and see her precious sister. The maid who saw her return looked as if she had just seen a rescuer. The maid hurriedly reported to her that the young miss is refusing to eat her food. Marcia secretly wondered to herself if this was because of her absence from the room. And sure enough, upon seeing her older sister standing right there in front of her, Larsa's spoon finally started to move again towards her food, even though she did not say a single word out loud. Her meaning was still crystal clear. Marcia's heart was suddenly filled with a mix of many different and powerful emotions. This incident only served to strengthen her resolve to help her dear sister open up her heart. After the meal was finally finished, Marcia suggested to her, "Let us go for a nice walk together." And so, two very beautiful figures were then added to the already lovely and peaceful garden. She took Larsa to admire the breathtaking sunset and described the beautiful sights in a cheerful tone. Also, her sister could personally experience the great beauty of the world. Heaven always rewards the diligent. Under Marcia's careful guidance, Larsa actually tried to smell the sweet fragrance of the beautiful flowers in the garden. For a person who had closed off her heart for so long, this was an incredibly huge step forward. Marcia smiled with a knowing look, her heart softening even more. Since her sister was getting tired, she found a place nearby for them to rest. But then someone else approached them from just a short distance away from where they were sitting, and it was Richard, who said mournfully, "I thought that I would never get to see you two again." Marcia, who was fiercely protective of her sister, quickly shielded Larsa by putting her behind her back. Seeing her do this, Richard grew anxious and quickly tried to explain, "I do not mean you any harm," but Marcia gave him no chance to speak, wanting only to leave quickly. Richard hurriedly blocked their path. Then he stammered, "Can you please introduce her to me?" Marcia looked down at her sister Larissa, fully intending to refuse his very forward request, but to her great surprise, her very shy little sister actually made eye contact with someone for the very first time. Of course, Marcia was delighted to see this change in her sister, so she changed her tune. "It is not impossible for me to introduce you, but your attitude towards me used to be terrible." The prideful Richard finally dropped his pride. For the very first time, he actually apologized to another person. Only after that did Marcia feel happy enough to introduce her treasured sister to him. But she was surprised when she saw his cheeks turn red, just like a cloud at sunset. Marcia was completely confused. Did this man really have to blush quite so much? This made Marcia see him differently. However, it was impossible for him to think he could win her sister over with just that. After all, in the story, she was fated to get married to the main character, Fabian. Time passed quickly. The two sisters had already been living at the Grand Duke's home for 2 weeks. The physical injuries that Larissa had suffered were now completely healed. However, the doctors warned that she should not be scared again, or she could suffer a mental breakdown and go mad. But based on how things were going at the moment, the situation looked very hopeful. Marcia also felt sure that she could help Larissa open up and trust others again. At the very least, her sister was no longer refusing to join in on some of their games. She watched the handsome chef who was standing beside them as he continuously praised Larissa. Marcia felt extremely happy, as if she had eaten honey, when a tray of cookies emerged from the oven. Larissa slowly made her way over to where Marcia was standing. Then, she carefully handed Marcia the gingerbread cookie that she was holding. Marcia felt very moved as she held the cookie in her palm. She was worried that she might accidentally break this small symbol of her sister's affection. After they had finished with all the baking, it was finally time for them to go. Everyone was sad to see them leave, and eagerly invited them to visit and play again soon. Marcia asked her sister gently, "Do you want to come back here again?" Even though Larissa did not say anything out loud, she nodded her head. Marcia was already quite pleased and satisfied with her sister's positive response. Recently, Larissa was behaving more and more like any other ordinary child. They planned to eat in the dining hall but heard laughter inside. Marcia peeked in and saw Leonid and Richard. Leonid was very enthusiastic and invited the two sisters to come inside and eat with them. When he saw them, Richard intentionally coughed a couple of times to get their attention. He was obviously trying to get the girl he had a crush on to notice that he was there. But Marcia deliberately walked past him to the dining table and completely ignored Richard during their conversation. Then, a maid brought a mango milkshake. Larissa was instantly fascinated and completely captivated by the special drink. Marcia watched her younger sister with a gentle expression on her face take a small sip of the drink and then show a very happy and satisfied look. The adorable sight simply melted her heart. But Richard's reaction made her uncomfortable. What was with his expression? How could he dare have inappropriate thoughts about her sister? At that moment, Marcia felt so angry that she wished she could just tear his eyes out. She would never permit her treasured little sister to be pursued by someone like him. She quickly changed the topic by asking them, "So what were you two talking about just now?" Leonid laughed and answered, "We were just sharing some interesting stories from our school days. Fabian and we all surprisingly attended the same school." Just as he finished his sentence, Fabian himself appeared. Leonid immediately began to gossip. "So please tell us the story of how you two first met." Marcia felt so embarrassed that she did not know where she should even start the story. Fabian said, "I was out one time, and she happened to pass by and ended up saving my life." Marcia felt overjoyed and thought to herself, "That is what I expect from the Grand Duke. So brief and direct. And then I fell in love with her at first sight." Everyone was shocked. Leonid even spat out a mouthful of his wine. Marcia was so flustered and very annoyed by his comment that she almost dropped her drinking glass. She really did not want her younger sister to get the wrong idea from his words. Fortunately, Larissa was still too young and innocent to understand what love at first sight really meant. Facing a warning look from his wife, Fabian just ignored her and closed his eyes. This made Marcia very uneasy. She hoped he would not say anything cruel again. To her annoyance, Leonid was being very nosy and continued to ask them more questions. And it did not seem like Fabian had any plans at all to hide any of the details. He directly revealed all the specific details about how the assassin was discovered at that time. Marcia quickly tried to make it seem less important, saying it was only a lucky guess. Fabian smiled and said meaningfully, "My lady is truly amazing." At this point, Marcia realized that her own actions had probably made them suspicious of her. But what was she supposed to do about it? The only thing she could do was act ignorant. However, she did not realize just how unconvincing her attempts at acting were. Soon, Richard's revenge came. "Don't tell me you planned that whole incident just to get closer to Fabian." Marcia snorted with disdain. "I didn't even know who he was back then." "Then why were you giving him so much of your attention at that time?" he asked. Marcia got annoyed and said matter-of-factly, "It was simply because he is handsome." Leonid once again spit out a mouthful of wine in a very ungraceful way. It is true that as long as you do not feel awkward, you can make others feel awkward instead. A dinner filled with investigative questions finally ended in a ridiculous way. Of course, the intelligent Fabian had already confirmed some things, but the mysterious nature of Marcia had only made him even more interested in her. After the dinner was over, Leonid went and found Fabian by himself. "Is your mind just completely filled with different thoughts about your wife at the moment?" "You talk far too much nonsense," Fabian replied. Leonid then became uncharacteristically shy. "I will leave after just one more question. You haven't completed the marriage with your wife yet, have you?" At night, Larissa frequently had bad nightmares. Marcia, who was always by her side, felt completely heartbroken and pained to see her suffer. Then, she happened to notice that there was something hidden in her sister's blankets. After lifting them up, she saw that it was the special cookie they had made earlier that day. Does this little one finally have something that she truly likes and treasures? Overcome with emotion, Marcia could not stop herself from giving her a gentle kiss. But this action startled Larissa, who woke up. Marcia looked apologetic and was very worried that she had accidentally scared her younger sister. So she gently explained to her, "This is called a goodnight kiss. I just hope you have very sweet dreams." As the sound of the beautiful lullaby began to fill the quiet room in her ears, Larissa fell asleep once again, and then she had a very unusual dream. In it was her favorite cookie. The cookie asked, "Was she putting her mouth right on your face just now to try and eat you?" Of course she was not. That is something that people call a goodnight kiss. It means that if you kiss someone's cheek, they will be able to have a good night's sleep. In reality, Larissa did not actually understand the real connection between kissing and sleeping, but the tingling feeling she experienced felt very nice to her that night. Feeling worried, Marcia ended up sleeping on the sofa for the entire night. She did not even notice when Larissa, who had woken up early, came over to her side. For the very first time, the usually withdrawn Larissa suddenly felt the desire to touch another person. Unfortunately, at that exact moment, Marcia happened to open her eyes. This gave Larissa a huge scare. She quickly hurried away, as if she were caught doing something wrong. When Marcia became fully awake, she understood what just happened. she thought. If only she had pretended that she was still asleep a moment ago. However, her sister's reaction also filled Marcia with a new sense of strong determination. Of course, her very shy sister would still need a lot of gentle coaxing from her. Luckily for them both, the situation was not as bad as it seemed. Their time together made Larissa less shy. With Marcia's coaxing, she finally showed her head, not knowing the effect her cute appearance had on Marcia. In order to protect her younger sister's very fragile and delicate sense of self-esteem, Marcia made the decision that they would simply eat their breakfast inside the room. However, the weather outside at that time was truly beautiful and quite wonderful. She decided she would take her sister out for a nice walk after they finished their meal. Just then, a new maid walked in. She introduced herself as Sophia, sent by the Grand Duke to care for them. Marcia did not expect that Fabian, even with his very busy schedule, would be so considerate. The sound of Sophia's voice suddenly snapped her out of her daydreams. The rooms that belong to the past Grand Duchesses have all been cleaned. Would you two like to take a tour? With nothing else to do, Marcia did not refuse. Though prepared, she was stunned by the luxurious decor. The walk-in closet amazed her most. There were enough clothes inside for 3 years, without repeating an outfit. So Marcia just asked the maid to choose an outfit that would be suitable for a walk outside. As for Larissa, she still did not completely trust anyone other than her sister to dress her. While walking around, Marcia asked, "What is that room used for?" Sophia said happily, "That's your and the Grand Duke's bridal chamber." Thinking about certain scenes, Marcia almost burst from embarrassment. She quickly waved her hand in dismissal and said, "Let us go look at the other rooms instead." When the two sisters finally walked out of their room, they had both changed into new outfits. Larissa, in particular, looked especially full of energy and seemed very happy. Marcia was also in a very good mood at that moment, was so happy she started humming a little tune. Suddenly, a thought echoed in her mind. "That damned woman dared to run away with my source of money." The man's voice sounded just like a demon's. Marcia recognized who it was right away. She quickly and urgently told Larissa to hurry and go straight back to her own room. However, this time, it seemed that luck was not going to be on her side at all. Her devilish father had already appeared right in front of them, laughing like a madman. Larissa looked like she'd been struck by lightning, her face pale when faced with Robert, and his overjoyed attempt to embrace her. The two sisters looked as if they had just seen a demon from hell. Larissa, in particular, seemed like she was on the very edge of having a complete mental breakdown. The terrible scenes of abuse and torment from her childhood started to flash through her mind. Marcia didn't want her weeks of effort to be wasted. She turned and ordered Sophia to take the young lady away. Robert would not let his money source escape. Marcia tried to stop him, wanting to talk to her father. But the only thing that she received from him in return was a very heavy slap. The force of the blow was so strong that it sent her stumbling backward several steps. Before she finally fell down onto the ground, Marcia had absolutely no time to feel the pain. She saw her father moving closer to her sister, and Larissa's condition was extremely unstable. Ignoring the risk of being hit again, Marcia rushed forward once more. At that exact moment, a voice suddenly called out from the second floor of the building. "So this is the type of person that the Grand Duchess's own father is." Marcia fixed her appearance and then managed to smile. "It seems I have made a fool of myself." Robert was furious, shouting, "I am a nobleman! And is that your reason for hitting the Grand Duchess?" The guards who arrived immediately restrained him from moving. Only then did Marcia finally feel a true sense of relief. At that moment, Fabian's personal assistant also arrived on the scene. He announced loudly, "You as well. Please come with me. His Grace, the Grand Duke, wishes to see you now." Considering that her father was, in fact, both a nobleman and also her sister's legal guardian, Marcia couldn't use her status as Grand Duchess to act impulsively. Of course, Robert knew this too, so he only demanded to take Larissa. Marcia would never agree to such a thing. She would not let her sister fall back into that terrible situation. The father and his daughter were now facing each other, locked in a complete standstill. At this critical moment, the Grand Duke Fabian finally made his appearance. Robert knew the stakes and did not dare to be rude. So he acted like a pitiful father who lost his beloved daughter, claiming he wouldn't have found them without a benefactor's help. Marcia was completely shocked by this and asked him, "Who was it that told you?" Robert did not try to hide the information and directly revealed Eloise's name to them. Now the entire truth of the situation was finally out. Marcia never expected it would be Eloise. Faced with Robert, who continued to insist on taking Larissa away, Marcia, no matter how angry, was for a moment at a loss for what to do. So she had no choice but to look over at Fabian for his help. She also quietly tried to remind him about the terms and conditions of their contract. However, Fabian seemed to be pouting about something and did not say anything at all. When he saw this reaction, Robert became even more arrogant than he was before. But when he saw a pair of increasingly red eyes, Robert felt a shiver of fear. The thought of not being able to take Larissa with him was driving him completely mad. To everyone's surprise, Fabian suddenly started to laugh out loud. He then began to tell everyone the very touching story of how he first fell in love with Marcia. As she was looking at his eyes, that were now filled with such a tender expression, Marcia felt truly numb inside. How was he able to act this part so convincingly? But Robert did not care about Marcia's happiness. He was losing his patience, stating that if they did not agree, he would take this issue to the emperor. Fabian did not seem worried. He simply asked the man, "If you truly are her father, then why is Larissa so extremely frightened of you? She can't even walk right now. Besides that, as you can clearly see, her current health is not good enough for a long journey." Just as Robert was getting ready to try and play dirty to get what he wanted, Fabian ordered someone to bring him a box. "I understand that you will be very lonely without Larissa's company. Please take this box as a form of compensation for your troubles. This is the official property deed for a gold mine located in the Catherine region. It has enough gold for you to dig for 100 years. Robert was very tempted. His daughter's diamond tears still required a buyer. How could that be as easy as having a gold mine? But when he found out they wanted to keep Larissa for 3 years, Robert became agitated. After all, he wanted to have both a gold mine and the diamonds. This extremely greedy expression on the man's face made Fabian finally lose his patience. He demanded to know, "I heard that you actually hit my wife earlier today. So are you prepared to go and taste the food they serve in the Grand Duke's prison?" After he said this, he had his guards throw Robert out of the residence, ignoring all his protests. It was a shame his position as Grand Duke was not yet stable. Otherwise, he would not have let a poor nobleman run wild so easily. After they were alone, Fabian began to check Marcia's injuries. "If I had known this would happen, you should have agreed to let me send someone to assassinate him." Seeing the murderous look in Fabian's eyes, Marcia quickly said to him, "I am really fine, and also, thank you so very much for all of your help today." Fabian shook his head, and then told her that he believed it was his own fault. "I will not let this happen again. How dare that lowlife touch my people?" Hearing this, Marcia felt a strange flutter in her heart. "By the way, don't call me Your Grace, just call me Fabian." At that particular moment, Marcia even began to wonder if he might actually like her. In the meantime, when Fabian went back and returned to his personal study, he saw Leonid waiting with a wine glass. He looked at Pratt and said, "Who gave him wine?" Leonid pretended not to hear and asked playfully, "Where's your father-in-law?" Fabian lazily said, "Driven away with money. For now." It is really very strange. The sisters seem to want their father's love, but the younger sister seems indifferent to the older one. After hearing this comment, Fabian chuckled. In any case, Miss Marcia's kindness is definitely beyond any doubt. Leonid choked and had lost count of how many times he had just spat out his wine. Leonid thought, "This absolute idiot still calls his own wife Miss Marcia," as if he knew what Leonid was thinking. Fabian could only use a look of disdain to hide his own embarrassment. But Leonid looked like he had just discovered a huge secret. "I finally get it now. Your marriage to her is completely fake, isn't that right?" Fabian was completely speechless. Had he really been that obvious to other people? But how could he pretend to be in love? To understand Marcia's situation, Fabian had Pratt investigate. He learned her brother was a compulsive gambler and that her father was obsessed with doing business, but he had repeatedly failed at it. All of this was leading to the family's financial situation being in a very unstable state. He had even managed to find Marcia's most treasured pair of earrings on the black market. According to the results of the investigation, her older brother had sold them to pay off his gambling debts. The more that Fabian heard about her situation, the angrier he became, clenching his fists tightly. He could have never imagined that his own wife would have to deal with such a terrible family. At that exact moment, a maid came running into the room. She was very flustered. "Your Grace, Something absolutely terrible has happened to Miss Larissa. She is now. Marcia was very afraid that her younger sister would end up biting herself while in her agitated state, so she actually put her own hand inside of her sister's mouth to prevent that. At that very same time, Fabian had just arrived right outside of the closed door. But just as he was about to go and push the door open, he suddenly froze. After all, their supposed marriage was only a business transaction, so what right did he have to just barge into her room? But for some unknown reason, he found that he really wanted to care for Marcia. As the door to the room was slowly and gently pushed open by someone, he saw a tear-streaked Marcia and Larissa, who was trapped in a nightmare she couldn't escape. He watched Marcia focus completely on comforting her sister. Fabian felt as though he had no right or place to get involved in the situation. After thinking about it for a long time, he felt he could only turn around and leave. But as he was leaving, he accidentally stepped on something on the floor. Fabian bent down to pick it up and saw it was a cookie. He glanced back gently at his wife, then wrapped the cookie up and placed it aside. He did not know that Richard had actually been waiting outside the door for a very long time. He was extremely worried about Larissa's current condition and really wanted to know what was happening. But Fabian was in a terrible mood and told him bluntly, "Just go back. I will inform you if there is any news." A few minutes later at the Grand Duke's stables, Fabian, in casual clothes, demanded a horse. The groom wanted to say something, but was intimidated by his look and stayed quiet. In the end, the groom could only stand there and watch as the very emotional Grand Duke galloped quickly away. Fabian, who had been missing family affection ever since he was a small child. Fabian could not understand how Marcia could possibly be so selfless for her sister. He clearly remembered the bite marks on her hand. He believed in her love for her sister. But wasn't she afraid this devotion would get her hurt? For some particular reason, Fabian discovered that he was actually and truly falling in love with her. He thought to himself, if only Marcia were really and truly his wife in every way, would he also be able to be surrounded by so much genuine love then? And far away, Roger was furious. After all, without Larissa, he no longer had any money for his gambling addiction. When he finally learned that his own sister had become the new wife of the Grand Duke, he immediately set his sights on trying to get help from Fabian's ambitious uncle. But Marcia was still completely unaware that a new danger was quickly approaching her. At this moment, all of her thoughts and her focus were on her younger sister. Seeing the broken cookie on the table, she understood her sister's episode. The shock Larissa received was manageable. However, it was because of a particular maid's carelessness that her treasured cookie was broken. This special cookie represented her newfound hope after finally coming out from a period of darkness. And now that it was broken like this, it became the final straw that broke the camel's back. A worried Marcia silently made a choice. Without Robert's harassment, Larissa regained her composure. Richard had to return to the academy for his studies, and Marcia became completely focused on sewing a special gift for her sister. One particular morning, just as Larissa was waking up from her sleep, she found that Marcia was already sitting right by her bed, just keeping her quiet company. But her hands, for some reason, were covered in bandages. When Marcia took out a cookie doll, she vaguely understood why her sister's fingers were injured. At that very moment, Larissa's sad and gray heart seemed to light up once again. Looking at her sister's silently bowed head and quiet expression, Marcia asked her in an awkward tone of voice, "Don't you like the gift?" But in the very next second, a distinctive clinking sound could be heard in the room. It was the sound of Larissa's tears as they turned into diamonds and fell to the ground. Marcia quickly asked with a lot of concern, "What is wrong? Are you not feeling very well?" But Larissa's condition was very calm. It was not at all like she was crying from being sad. Marcia could only hug her sister gently and try to comfort her. It's okay to cry if you want to. Perhaps she was very tired from all of her crying, because Larissa soon fell asleep again. Marcia stroked her head, relieved, but then she froze in shock. Unknowingly, the floor was now covered in diamonds. At this exact moment, she finally understood the intense feelings of her father and brother. To keep the secret safe, she quickly found a bag and started picking all of them up. She thought that maybe these could become her sister's private savings in the near future. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Roger had gone to see Fabian's uncle. Roger found Fabian's uncle and asked him how he felt about having the Grand Duke title stolen from him. Looking at the furious and very humiliated Marquis, Roger started to speak. Roger told him bluntly, "I can help you take back the position of the Grand Duke." The Marquis did not believe him. Fabian has fulfilled the old Grand Duke's will. He has no weaknesses, but Roger claimed that he knew about a particular stain on Marcia's personal life. As long as she cannot be the Grand Duchess, can't you then force the current Grand Duke to give up his title? Of course, he also had one condition. He wanted to be able to take Larissa away with him. The cunning old Marquis did not agree to the deal right there on the spot. He simply said that he would need some more time to consider the entire proposal. After Roger had finally left, he called for his most trusted and hidden confidant. It is strange. Logically speaking, shouldn't he be happy that his own sister became the Grand Duchess? There must be a secret we don't know. From today, secretly monitor Roger's every move. Just as Marcia was about to find a place to hide the diamonds, there was a knock on her door. She initially thought that it was just her personal maid Sophia at the door, but it turned out to be the Grand Duke. Fabian? She said, surprised. She asked him with a surprised look on her face. What is it that brings you here? Fabian was acting a bit strange, stammering as he spoke. Marcia guessed. Are you here to see Larissa? She just fell asleep and is fine. Seeing the hesitant Grand Duke, Marcia also felt helpless. And she wondered why he had such a strong floral scent on him today. At this particular moment, Fabian's own heart was beating extremely fast inside his chest. He calmed himself down a little bit and finally took out the item he was hiding behind his back. Actually, I came to bring you flowers today. Marcia happily took them and said, surprised. They're hyacinths. Yes, I just picked them from the garden. I hope you and Miss Larissa will like them. When she noticed that his large hands were all covered in dirt from the garden, Marcia's eyes could not help but light up with a happy and warm expression. Thank you so very much for these. I am sure that Larissa will like them too. Fabian was a little confused. You don't know what flowers your sister likes? At this point, Marcia realized she had misspoken. She quickly changed the subject. Your Grace is so very thoughtful. My sister and I have already received so much from you since we first came here. Upon hearing her say this, Fabian's heart was suddenly filled with a deep sense of pity. Marcia asked him with a worried expression, What is the matter? Is something wrong? To her surprise, Fabian got emotional. I say, it is not much at all. I will come back tomorrow with daffodils. You are coming again? Can I not come? All right then. I have something that I need to attend to right now. I will see you tomorrow. Fabian's very strange and unusual behavior left Marcia feeling a little bit confused. The very next day, as Marcia was eating her breakfast together with Larissa, Fabian did, in fact, come and knock on the door to their room. He was holding daffodils. Marcia, who thought he was joking, was surprised. He was busy with his duties. How could he have time to deliver flowers? Fabian, as if his intelligence had dropped, said, I promised you yesterday that I would come. At that exact moment, Marcia felt a small tug on her clothes from somewhere behind her. She turned her head around and saw that Larissa had come out of her room, so she smiled warmly and then handed the beautiful flowers from Fabian to her younger sister. From the smile on Larissa's mouth, you could tell she loved the flowers. Marcia felt gratified and compassionate. She invited Fabian to dine with them, all while she was telling Larissa more information about the beautiful daffodils. And it was true that Larissa, at this moment, looked exactly like a beautiful flower fairy. Thinking about her sister's future marriage to Fabian, Marcia could not help but smile to herself. Of course, Fabian did not know he had been sold out by her. He stared at the smiling Marcia, stunned for a moment. When he recovered, he quickly turned his head away from her. I heard that Marcus Lanyard has now gone back home. Is that correct? Fabian was a little surprised by her question and simply replied, Yes, that's right. Marcia asked, Did something happen to him? Why did he leave so suddenly? Are you sad to see him go? I just feel bad for not saying goodbye. Fabian realized he had been a bit harsh and coughed lightly. I will go with you to visit him when there is a chance. During the course of their conversation, Marcia casually mentioned that she really loved to dance. She said that it helped her to relax and always lifted up her spirits. Fabian took note of this information and committed her sentence to his memory. Just then, Sophia came forward and said, I'll go put the flowers in a vase. Larissa showed a look of confusion. So Fabian explained, flowers wilt after being picked. Putting them in a vase can delay this. After hearing this explanation from him, Larissa became a little bit sad and gloomy. Marcia was afraid that her sister's mood would drop, but she did not know how to comfort her. Luckily for them, Fabian continued his explanation. All things in nature have their own way of survival. Even if a flower withers, it will bloom again next year, so temporary withering is just to allow it to bloom again. Marcia nodded her head in silent agreement. She never expected Fabian to have such a gentle and knowledgeable side to his personality. Seeing the curious and interested look in her sister Larissa's eyes, Marcia was very pleased, especially when she heard Fabian say that he could take her to see many different kinds of flowers. Upon hearing this, Larissa seemed to light up with happiness from the inside completely. Of course, his real goal was to invite Marcia on an outing. In a few days, the nobles are organizing a hunt. Let's go together. But I can't ride a horse or shoot a gun. Do not worry. That is an activity meant for us men. The ladies usually just enjoy tea parties in the forest. Marcia was very tempted by the offer, but she pridefully said that she would think about it. She could feel his attentiveness and how important she was to him. And for some reason, she felt truly happy. Because Fabian had a pair of crimson eyes, Eloise fell in love with him when she was 6. 10 years later, she had grown into a graceful young woman, and the boy who was once poor had now become even more dashingly handsome. She had always thought that with her high social status, she could easily win his heart, but much to her surprise, he ended up marrying a girl he had only known for 3 days. Eloise was nearly completely consumed by the raging fire of jealousy deep inside her heart. At that moment, a servant knocked on the door to announce she had a visitor. When she learned the man was her rival's ex-fiancé, Eloise quickly had him invited into the main reception room of her house. Carl, however, clearly did not have a very strong impression of Marcia in his memory anymore. After all, who would ever pay very much attention to a noble lady from a fallen family? Eloise said, "Seriously, your ex-fiancé was nothing more than a common marriage swindler, and the person she managed to swindle was my own fiancé." Hearing Eloise's story, Carl could not help but exclaim in amazement. He never imagined that the woman he had cast aside was capable of doing something like this. At this point in their conversation, Eloise could not hold herself back any longer. She very sincerely asked him if he would be willing to do her a special favor. But Carl, acting as if he had expected this request, simply asked her, "And why should I?" Eloise had not expected him to be so very difficult. She could only ask, "Just state your conditions." He replied, "I want to have an excellent and high-status lady for a wife." A sudden chill instantly ran right down the length of Eloise's spine. Her lady-in-waiting, who stood nearby, warned him, "Please be careful and watch your words, sir." Carl then explained, "You misunderstand my meaning. I just hope that you can play matchmaker for me in high society." Eloise suddenly felt a strong headache coming on from all the stress of the situation. She had a strong feeling this man was unreliable. But to win Fabian back, she couldn't afford to be picky. She immediately made a promise to introduce him to 10 different ladies after the matter was resolved. Only then did Carl agree to her request with satisfaction. Meanwhile, Fabian suddenly remembered that Marcia liked to dance, so he gave an order to his loyal assistant to go and find a dance instructor for him. This startled Pratt. "But don't you hate dancing, Your Grace?" Fabian's brow furrowed. "Can't I be interested in it now? Also, the dance instructor must be a man." Pratt's mind was a complete mess as he thought to himself, "The lives of these nobles are truly chaotic." Just then, he suddenly recalled someone had sent a letter to the Duchess. Fabian glanced at it out of curiosity and was completely stunned. It was a very passionate and romantic love letter that was addressed directly to Marcia. It asked her to meet the sender at the opera house the day after tomorrow and mentioned preparing a fatal poison to harm him. The final signature at the bottom of the letter simply said, "From your ex-fiancé." Fabian nearly gritted his teeth to pieces as he read the letter. Pratt, seeing his expression, said he would immediately investigate this person. Fabian, however, remained calmer, suspecting it might be a malicious plan to slander her and cause trouble. But Pratt then reminded him that in the previous investigation they had conducted, the Grand Duchess did indeed have a former fiancé with whom the engagement had been broken off. After hearing these words from his assistant, the color completely drained from Fabian's face. For some reason, even though he knew Marcia was just his wife by contract, he felt an overwhelming and bitter jealousy. But Marcia, still completely unaware of the crisis that was approaching, was busy enjoying some delicious food. Just as she was handing a plate of fresh salad to Larissa, she accidentally discovered a note hidden inside a teacup. On the small piece of paper were written the following words: "Make sure to come alone, because she was very worried that Larissa's important secret would be discovered by someone else. Marcia was being extremely careful and vigilant about everything that was happening around her, so she immediately went to a nearby empty room that was adjacent to her own, and she nervously opened the mysterious note she had just found. The contents were similar to what Fabian had already seen, but it had an added threat. If you do not obey, the secret of the basement will be revealed. The signatory was now Carl. Her worst fear had come true. Marcia's heart was in turmoil. She ruled out her father and brother. But besides them, who else knew Larissa's secret? Soon, she thought of another person that she had completely overlooked. And that was Larissa's former wet nurse pal. Only that person could possibly ask to meet with her in such a secretive and strange way. Marcia, thinking she had it all figured out, was about to make plans when she was startled by Larissa, who had just arrived. When she saw the very worried and concerned look on her younger sister's face, Marcia felt very touched, and her heart was moved by her sister's concern, and became even more determined to protect her. So she said gently, "I'm going out for a little while tonight. You have to be good. I will make absolutely sure that my little Larissa grows up without having a single worry." Meanwhile, Fabian, who was still holding the secret letter in his hand, felt deeply disturbed by its contents. He remembered how Marcia used to always show him her invitation letters for his review. Fabian made the decision to go and openly ask her for her opinion on the matter. But when the door was opened, it was not Marcia who greeted him. Sophia said respectfully, "The Duchess has gone out on an errand." Fabian asked in a sensitive tone of voice, "Did she happen to say where she was going?" Sophia answered truthfully, "No, she did not. But her grace seemed a little bit distressed." Hearing this, the bad feeling in Fabian's heart grew stronger. He immediately turned around and gave an order. "Prepare a carriage for me right away." At the same time, on her way to the opera house, Marcia was thinking with a serious expression about how to handle the situation. Marcia arrived at the famous opera house right at the scheduled time for her meeting. She found that the mysterious person who had sent the note had not arrived yet, and she also noticed that he had chosen a particularly noticeable and obvious meeting spot. This discovery left her feeling a little bit confused. Was he worried that other people would not see them? Just then, the sound of a door opening came from behind her. "You are already here. It has been a while. I have missed you so dearly." In the meantime, Fabian had also just arrived at the very same opera house. When he learned that Marcia had snuck into the building using a fake name, his mood immediately soured and became extremely bad at that moment. Eloise, who had been waiting for him nearby, pretended that it was just a chance encounter, but on the inside she was blooming with delight. However, Fabian shoved her away from him rudely. And then he silently began to walk towards his own family's exclusive VIP viewing box. Eloise was so angry, she nearly gritted her teeth to pieces. She refused to believe Fabian could stay indifferent after seeing his wife cheat on him. As the two of them, Marcia and Carl, made their way out to the terrace, Carl also began his part of the performance. He greeted Marcia warmly as he approached her, and Marcia was a little bit slow to react to his sudden appearance and greeting. The letter clearly mentioned the basement's secret, but logically, the man in front of her could not possibly know about it. Carl was only focused on completing the specific task that Eloise had given to him, so he did not care at all about what was written in the letter. Carl said, "I just wanted to ask you out, so I wrote whatever." From inside the noble Grand Duke's very own private and exclusive viewing box, Fabian had the best view of the entire opera house, so it was very easy for him to spot Marcia directly opposite him. Of course, this was also a part of the careful and deliberate arrangement made by Eloise. Watching the two of them interacting with each other constantly, Fabian's expression turned extremely grim. Eloise, on the other hand, wore a very smug and gloating smile on her face. Seeing the man suddenly and strangely lean in very close to her, Marcia immediately pushed him away and demanded, "Why are you so close to me?" Carl, who was not bothered by this, began to speak about his supposed lovesickness for her. Marcia did not believe a single word of it. She only wanted to know if he held Larissa's secret, but she knew that she could not just ask him about the secret directly. The entire situation between them quickly came to a complete and total standstill. Unbeknownst to them both, Eloise was making very sarcastic remarks from the other side of the theater. She could clearly see the deep and intense inner turmoil that Fabian was experiencing, and that was precisely the kind of outcome that she had wanted to happen. So she started to slander Marcia's name with a number of added embellishments. She was saying How could such a person be worthy of being the Grand Duchess? She is ruining the Laurent family's name. Upon hearing her say these specific words, Fabian suddenly jolted in surprise, and then he suddenly burst into laughter. Eloise was baffled. She was actually worried he might have gone mad from the shock, but in reality, Fabian had just remembered something very important from the past. He had once personally promised Marcia that she could do anything she wanted to ruin the Laurent family name. This was because his own ultimate and final goal was to completely destroy this entire family. But Marcia had always been careful to protect the reputation of the Grand Duchess, so why would she cross that line now? Eloise realized something was very wrong and shouted, "Your wife is having an affair! Aren't you angry at all?" Fabian, who had now regained his composure, slowly raised his head to look at her. And then he stared directly at her, with his increasingly crimson-colored eyes. Eloise couldn't help but feel very guilty and afraid. As expected, Fabian sneered, "Let's end this little prank right here. My personal time is very precious, and you should probably go home early as well." Eloise knew it was all over. She yelled, "You know that I love you, so why do you always ignore me?" Fabian said coldly, "Even if I had 100 chances, I would never choose you." Eloise's heart trembled. She asked, "Why? That woman is just a tool to you." "Because I don't like you at all. And how do you know that I do not like her? Maybe in the very beginning, she and I were just involved in a simple transaction. But you do not know the wonder of love. I have already." "Don't say it," Eloise suddenly shouted, cutting him off. This was the very last small shred of dignity that she had left to her name. At that exact moment, Fabian was startled by a sound from the box next to them. It turned out that Carl had just brought over a glass of some fruit wine for Marcia. Marcia was very worried that he might have drugged it, so she would never drink it. This action of hers successfully enraged Carl. He immediately forgot his agreement with Eloise and was about to get physical. At that very critical moment, Fabian leaped over the railing without a single moment of hesitation. Just then, she noticed a familiar scent coming from behind her. It was Fabian, who had just crossed over from the box on the opposite side. Marcia was completely full of questions. The door was clearly located on the other side of the room. At this moment, Fabian was having trouble controlling his emotions, and he kept pouring out his worries to Marcia. Carl, who had been so arrogant just a single moment ago, was instantly completely silenced, especially when he saw Fabian's terrifyingly crimson eyes. After a moment of thought, he prepared to escape. But Fabian's large and powerful hand managed to reach him first, before he could get away. "Where are you going, Viscount Carl?" Carl had never expected him to know his identity. At this current rate, he probably would not be able to survive in aristocratic circles any longer. So he had no other choice but to confess he was acting under someone's orders. But Fabian already knew the truth of the matter. So after he finished teaching him a very painful lesson, he finally let him go. Carl, being very petty, deliberately turned back around and said, "You should keep a better eye on your cousin." By now, he completely and thoroughly hated Eloise for getting him into this situation. But he did not know that Marcia possessed the special ability to hear negative thoughts. However, facing an angry Fabian, she had no time for anything else. She quickly explained she was innocent and didn't intentionally meet a strange man. But much to her surprise, that was not what Fabian seemed to care about at all. He asked her with a noticeable tremor in his voice as he spoke to her, "If something had happened to you, what would I have done?" Marcia froze. Was this reaction a sign of his concern for her? "From now on, I forbid you from going out by yourself. At the very least, Sophia must accompany you, so that I can find you when you need my help." Marcia found it very difficult to meet his intense gaze. Then Fabian did something uncharacteristic and extended his hand out towards her. And he said with fake anger, "If there is a next time, I will be angry." Marcia asked guiltily, "Aren't you afraid I might actually have an affair?" "I know that you will not, because Larissa is the only one who is in your heart." Hearing this, Marcia turned her head away shyly. In truth, a big reason she initially took care of Larissa was out of fear of death. In the original story, the character Marcia had died at his very hands for that exact reason. Just as Fabian was hesitating about whether to confess to the woman he loved, Marcia suddenly thought of something and shouted, "Eloise is in danger!" Meanwhile, Eloise was leaving the opera house in a complete state of total despair. Heaven only knows how painful it is to be hated by the one you love. Just then, she suddenly felt someone was behind her. She turned her head around to see who it could possibly be. To see it was Carl, sweating profusely, but with a wicked grin on his face. Eloise felt not a single shred of guilt about the situation. She completely rejected his large hand when he tried to offer her some support, but as she was getting onto her carriage, she suddenly realized that something was wrong. She was just about to turn around and shout that this was not her personal carriage, when a large and powerful hand forcefully pushed her deep inside the carriage. As the carriage began to speed up, Eloise said in shock, "Are you completely crazy? What are you doing?" Carl did not answer her question. Instead, he just asked her, "What do you think I am doing?" "It is all your fault. I have now been kicked out of high society for good." Eloise argued back, "Even so, I can still help arrange a very good marriage for you." Carl flew into a furious rage. "I have crossed the Laurent family. I am completely finished now. So, after thinking about it carefully, I have made a new decision. I have decided that you are going to elope with me." Eloise was terrified, but pretended to be composed. "I am a marquis's daughter." But Carl had already planned out his entire escape route ahead of time. "I have already arranged for us to go to a secret manor. Once the deed is done between us, everything will be settled." No matter how fierce Eloise had been in the past, she was still only a young woman. Now she was completely and utterly terrified by the man's brutal actions. She started screaming frantically for someone to help her, but absolutely no one responded. Just at the moment when she thought that she was completely doomed to her fate, the carriage suddenly started to shake very violently. Carl panicked and yelled, "What is going on outside there?" When he saw that the Grand Duke's personal attendants were waiting right outside, he intended to crash through the door and make his escape. But in the next second, a pistol was pressed against his head. Watching as Carl was being taken away by the guards, Eloise realized she had been saved. The person who had come to rescue her was Fabian's assistant, Pratt. In response to Eloise's sincere thanks, Pratt bowed and said, "I was only following the orders I was given. The one you should truly thank is Her Grace, the Grand Duchess." Meanwhile, because Pratt had ridden off with one of the horses, Marcia had to walk home. Fabian suggested, "Why don't you ride with me on my horse?" Marcia said in a very shy tone of voice, "That is not really necessary." However, she found that she could not resist the handsome man's request. Faced with the handsome man's request, she ultimately could not resist the temptation, and finally agreed. Fabian, having gotten his wish, smiled so widely his eyes nearly disappeared. And so an ambiguous feeling began to fill the quiet forest. Since this was her very first time riding on a horse, Marcia was a bit uncomfortable. Fabian, afraid she would fall off, quickly wrapped his arm around her waist. At that moment, Marcia felt like her heart was about to leap out of her chest. Fabian also happened to notice that her entire body was very tense, and so he asked her with concern, "Are you scared? I can ride a bit slower." Marcia was speechless. This was just far too intimate for her, so she had to change the subject between them by making some simple small talk. But the two of them were just far too close together at that moment, especially since Fabian was an incredibly handsome man with a charming personality. A moment later, Marcia became so shy that she could not even speak a word. Oblivious to his feelings, Marcia instinctively avoided the emotional question. She didn't want to take her sister's destined male lead. However, when she finally pushed open the door to Larissa's room, she found that the bed was completely empty. It turned out she was sitting alone in the living room, waiting for her sister to return home. Marcia went up to her with a look of concern. "Why are you not asleep yet? Were you waiting for me?" Larissa nodded her head seriously, and then she immediately let out a very long and tired yawn. Marcia's heart nearly melted. She hugged her tightly, praising what a good girl Larissa was, and she didn't see her emotionally scarred sister smile for the first time. And with Marcia's comforting company there to lull her to sleep, Larissa soon fell into a very sweet dream. Marcia could not help but smile warmly as she watched her sister sleep peacefully. Now it was finally time to deal with the informant. Sophia, who was truly an elite maid sent by Fabian, was able to quickly catch the servant who had secretly slipped Marcia the note. The girl was not much older than Larissa. For her sister's safety, Marcia steeled her heart. First, she sent away all of the other servants who were in the room. Then she looked down at the young girl who was kneeling on the floor, and she told her to speak. "Who was it that ordered you to do this thing?" The young maid said with a very terrified expression on her face, "It was a complete stranger. She gave me some money for doing it. I really do not know who she was." Marcia did not reply to her. Instead, she focused her power to listen to the maid's thoughts. The maid thought, Anyway, that person said the Grand Duchess is brainless, so I just need to stick to my story. And a clever idea quickly formed in Marcia's mind at that moment. She made the decision that she was going to try and bluff the young maid. Actually, she said, I have already caught your accomplice in this little scheme. She is being interrogated by Fabian himself in the very next room right now. From this moment on, I am going to ask you a total of 3 questions. If even a single one of your answers is different from your accomplice's answers, I will have you branded right on your face. The maid thought, how is that possible? Nicole is supposed to be hiding at the jewel workshop. Hearing this thought from the maid, Marcia could not help but smile with deep satisfaction. As she had expected, once she mentioned Nicole's name out loud, the young girl confessed everything. The mastermind behind the entire plot was, in fact, Miss Eloise herself, and the maid, named Nicole, was the person who had acted as the intermediary. Marcia quickly called for Sophia and commanded her to go to the jewel workshop to arrest a person named Nicole. The young maid asked in confusion, were you just deceiving me? Marcia beamed, all traces of her earlier fierce attitude gone. Honestly, she found it very hard to act like a villain, but for Larsa's safety, she knew she must do it. A few days afterward, she questioned Nicole using the exact same method. She learned that Eloise was investigating her family and had a slight suspicion that the basement contained some kind of secret. There was not much Marcia could do, so she decided she would handle things one step at a time. One day, feeling troubled, she went to see Fabian. He was in the middle of personally making her a cup of tea. Marcia changed her mood and then accepted the tea with a smile. However, Fabian had obviously noticed something was wrong and asked, did you need something? I have been very concerned about our marriage lately. Fabian suddenly broke into a cold sweat after learning she meant the servants, who might suspect they were not a genuine couple. He felt disappointed, but also relieved, and he let out a sigh. But then Marcia directly suggested they should share a room to stop the rumors. Fabian could not help turning his head away in shyness. It is said that one is virtuous without desire. Evidently, his own heart was no longer pure. But Marcia, still unaware of his feelings for her, casually said, I promise I won't touch you. You can take the bed. I will sleep on the sofa. Fabian paused, thinking about confessing his feelings, but Marcia assumed he was hesitant, and then said, if you ever get bored, what if we play some enjoyable games all night long? Fabian covered his face slightly, not sure if she was suggesting something more. Ultimately, they both agreed to begin sharing a room, starting that same night. That evening, after putting Larsa to bed, Marcia, wearing thoughtfully chosen pajamas, went to their room. She was carrying a box of toys. However, what Marcia had not expected was that the room had been decorated with many kinds of beautiful rose-scented candles. At that moment, Marcia was about to go crazy. She wondered, who in the world did this? She was terrified that Fabian might misunderstand and assume she did it. Before she could feel any relief, the door suddenly opened, and Fabian, after just a quick look at her, immediately widened his red eyes. It was unavoidable. Marcia was shimmering with a light sweat, looking attractive in her revealing nightgown. Fabian turned his head away, quietly telling himself, look away now. But she excitedly yelled traitor at him. Fabian then asked uncomfortably, what did I do wrong? We both agreed to pretend to sleep together, so why are you covered up so tightly? After saying this, she really moved closer and began to act. Fabian grabbed his collar and continued backing away. Marcia believed she had done something wrong. Noticing Fabian was about to work on documents, she quickly stopped him, saying, quote, stay awake and play with me. I have thought of many fun things. We can only play them at night. Just as a blushing Fabian's mind was racing, Marcia put out different cards and dice. To make the game more interesting and last much longer, she suggested the loser must drink a cup of wine for a penalty. Fabian, concerned about what could happen after drinking, refused right away. Marcia was obviously in a great mood and laughed, I'm only kidding. The loser will simply grant the winner one wish this time. Fabian at last agreed. But because the cards were brand new and slippery, Fabian, who recently cut his nails, found it difficult to pick them up. Marcia enthusiastically said, let me help you. And just like that, their hands accidentally made contact. In that moment, the room became strangely quiet. They could nearly hear each other's fast heartbeats. Fabian was the first one to react, pulling his hand away. Marcia let out a breath and promptly changed the conversation. It is unclear if Fabian was doing it purposely, but Marcia somehow succeeded in winning 10 consecutive rounds in a row. She said, feeling embarrassed, "It isn't fun if you always lose. Let us play something different." Fabian smiled and said, "Then let's play one final round." This time, he really drew 3 aces, so Fabian suggested asking a question. "Why do you want Larsa to become the next Grand Duchess?" Marcia had not expected that specific question. She was only following the book's plot in order to move the main story forward. But how could she ever tell him that truth? Seeing her hesitate, Fabian smiled and said, "If you don't wish to say, we can just consider it a favor you owe me." The carefree Marcia quickly cheered up, not knowing how her charm affected him constantly. As time passed, Marcia, who insisted on staying up all night, was actually the first one to fall asleep. Only then did Fabian really breathe a sigh of relief. Heaven knows how much self-control he had to exercise that night. Before, even holding her hands would not have caused any thoughts. But now, simply being near her made him blush without control. Even the hand she had touched was red and burning hot. Fabian looked affectionately at Marcia. He was worried she might get a stiff neck from her awkward sleeping position, so he decided to carry her to the bed. Marcia, feeling the movement, could not help but move her position, which frightened Fabian so much that he froze completely, not daring to move at all. Luckily, it was not long before Marcia fell soundly asleep again. After placing her softly on the bed, Fabian could not help but feel a rush of affection. At that crucial moment, he swallowed hard. He silently wondered when his self-control became so weak. He sat down on the nearby sofa with a very troubled heart. Tonight was certainly going to be a sleepless night. The following day, Marcia slept in very late. When Sophia said, "The master told us to prepare breakfast," Marcia remembered she had embarrassingly fallen asleep last night. The maids had obviously misunderstood the entire situation. Marcia drank her tea, pretending to be calm, and thought to herself, finally, a success. However, if this continued, what could she do tonight? After thinking hard with no solution, Marcia decided she would go out for some fresh air. Sophia suggested the view in the back garden was quite lovely, so she immediately went to get Larsa to admire the flowers with her. Surprisingly, there was a swing set in the garden. Larsa sat on it, feeling nervous. She always thought that swinging would feel scary, but instead, it felt like she was flying. By now, Larsa was acting more and more like a normal child, which filled Marcia with great determination. More importantly, Larsa did not reject other people anymore. This made Marcia feel very relieved. She sat on a chair, drinking her tea softly, and Fabian's face automatically appeared in her thoughts. Just then, the sound of someone's footsteps startled her. It was Larsa, who had finished playing and was coming over to rest. Marcia took out a storybook she had prepared earlier and kept by her side, but before she could begin reading it, she heard someone calling out her name. She looked up and saw it was Fabian. He had brought a little pony along with him. The small pony could not resist sticking its tongue out to lick Larsa. In her panic, Larsa then took a hard fall. Marcia nearly shrieked with worry. But for some reason, Larsa suddenly blushed. Fabian comforted her. "Don't be afraid. It licked you only because it likes you." Only then did Larsa stop acting shyly. Seeing her sister feeling so happy made Marcia very content. But Fabian's face suddenly became red with shyness. He found his own resistance to Marcia was growing weaker and weaker. Seeing that Marcia had noticed him, he very quickly turned his head away, but his bright red ears gave him away. Fortunately, Larsa came over at the crucial moment. Marcia instantly understood what she wanted. She invited Fabian to sit down for some tea and a conversation. About an hour later, Fabian had to leave for business. Marcia stood up and said, "I would like to talk with you alone for a moment." It turned out she wanted to say sorry for falling asleep the previous night. But Fabian gritted his teeth. And then he said with determination, "Actually, you do not have to do this." Marcia asked, confused, "What do you mean?" He replied, "I'm saying we don't have to share a room anymore. After last night, the servants will not gossip." Marcia lowered her head, hiding her own deep sadness, and she refused Fabian's kind offer to escort her back to her room. She was, in fact, a very proud person. Maybe she should not have gotten so hopeful. From that day forward, Fabian began sending all different kinds of gifts every day. This included special outfits for horse riding. Marcia didn't know whether to praise his thoughtfulness or call him extravagant. However, Larsa looked very stylish in the outfits, but she still wanted her sister to wear much cuter clothes. For a moment, Marcia was caught in a difficult choice. A confused Larsa widened her eyes, not understanding what her sister was doing. The next day, Marcia lets out a happy "whoa" as Fabian explains the horse for her to ride is inside, making her feel excited. Marcia bravely asks Fabian to teach her to ride without a whip, and he confidently assures her knights are trained that way. Marcia secretly smiles, feeling happy that her request for Larissa to learn riding seems perfectly fine now. She looks absolutely delighted and bubbly, thinking how adorable Larissa looks in her new riding outfit. Everyone stands ready with a beautiful white horse, as Fabian asks if they are all set for the riding lesson. Marcia, with a big happy smile, joyfully leaps onto the white horse, feeling completely free. Fabian looks at Marcia with admiration, telling her she truly has a talent for riding. Marcia grins widely, happily admitting that she really enjoys exercise. Larissa gently reaches out to a horse, looking more energetic than usual as she gets closer to the little calf. Larissa winks playfully at the horse, finding it incredibly sweet to see little creatures playing together. Marcia and Fabian smile sweetly while riding together, with Marcia thinking how so cute the scene is. The next morning, Marcia cheerfully opens her door, wondering if Larissa slept well and if it's time to wake up. Marcia looks at an empty bed, feeling a bit confused and wondering, "Larissa?" She rings a bell, a puzzled expression on her face, wondering where Larissa could have gone so early. Marcia asks a maid where Larissa is, and looks surprised when told she's already at the stables. The maid reminds Marcia about the lady's calf, explaining that Larissa rushed to the stables as soon as morning came. Marcia walks outside, a thoughtful look on her face, realizing it's the first time Larissa has left the mansion so early. Her face shows a mix of surprise and a touch of concern. Marcia spots Larissa gently interacting with a horse in the warm stable light. Larissa's eyes sparkle with curiosity, as Marcia wonders if she's always this eager. Marcia then gently pats Larissa's head, telling her sweetly that breakfast comes first before playtime. Larissa looks up and nods, politely agreeing to eat her breakfast. Larissa glances back longingly, making Marcia wonder if she regrets leaving the horse behind. Marcia smiles, asking Larissa if she's finished eating and ready to see the calf again, to which Larissa nods eagerly. She gently tells Larissa to slow down as they walk towards the stables, Larissa carrying carrots in her hands. Larissa happily feeds a carrot to the horse, thinking how much better this feels. Larissa looks on as Marcia points to a different area, saying she'll be right over there. Now, Marcia is back on the horse, looking observant as she spots someone. Marcia calls out, "Fabian," her question hanging in the air. Fabian appears, looking charming, and says he just happened to see her out there after breakfast. Fabian gently takes Marcia's hand, mentioning he heard she learned how to ride very quickly. Marcia smiles, saying she's good at simple things that just require physical activities. Fabian looks at Marcia with a soft gaze, telling her he thinks she has her own special charm all the time. Marcia's face blushes slightly, her heart fluttering with happiness. Fabian smiles warmly, making Marcia internally wish she felt her charm, but then her heart aches, knowing he loves Larissa, not her. He then comments on how cute Larissa is, and how she's gotten used to things. Larissa gently strokes the horse, thinking she wants to give it a cute name, just like her own. Marcia smiles brightly, suggesting to Sir Fabian that he should spend some quality time with Larissa. Fabian looks surprised, simply calling out Marcia's name. Fabian extends his hand, telling Marcia that if she truly thinks about it, she always puts Larissa first before herself. Marcia looks distressed, firmly saying, "That's not true." Marcia's eyes hold a mix of sadness and realization, as she thinks that even though this story is for Larissa, she had only been focused on her own survival. Fabian smiles sweetly at Marcia, reminding her not to worry cause she is his wife. Marcia's face flushes, her heart beating so fast, wondering why he said those unexpected words to her. Fabian, standing by the white horse, asks Marcia if she knows why he gave her the horse. Marcia looks at Fabian, a little confused, thinking he gave it to her as a present for Larissa's recovery, and she struggles with not falling for him. Fabian looks at Marcia with gentle affection, explaining he got the horse because he knew she wanted to learn to ride, hoping she'd be happy and smile with him. A hand gently reaching out, as the text reveals that the calf intended for Larissa has finally arrived. Fabian lovingly holds Marcia's hand and kisses it, telling her, "This is all for her." The next morning, Marcia, with a sudden jolt, hears a voice warning her not to claim witches can heal broken hearts, and she wonders why anyone is talking about witches all of a sudden. Marcia, standing among tall bookshelves, resolves that there is magic in this world, and she must find more information about witches. A stack of old books sits, waiting to be read, suggesting Marcia has found what she needs. Marcia sits down, carefully opening a large, ancient-looking book, ready to delve into its secrets. The book reveals that only people born with magic power can use it, and such people are called witches. The text explains that magic inheritance is a 50-50 chance, and its use depends on the mage's power classification. The book states clearly that female mages can only cast spells on creatures, while male mages can only affect inanimate objects, a rule with no exceptions. It further describes that male mages handle tasks like transporting and cutting objects, while female mages are in charge of healing and medical matters. The book mentions that the love magic of female mages is famous, and curse magic costs a fortune, which is why female mages are usually called witches. The progress of science has led to new medicine, so people no longer need to rely on expensive magic to cure illnesses. As science advanced, the importance of female mages gradually decreased, and people started hunting them for money, as nobles sought their curse magic to hide dark secrets. The ability to understand others' emotions is something that comes easily to a mage. Thieves took advantage of this decline to initiate witch hunts for money, and the nobles simply turned a blind eye. Sadly, most female mages have now almost completely vanished. Marcia looks down at the book, her expression somber, realizing how bitter it is that everything came down to money. Suddenly, Marcia's eyes widen, and she thinks, "Wait!" as a new understanding dawns on her. Marcia looks troubled, realizing that if her ability to read others' emotions is discovered, she might also be treated like a witch. She feels relieved that no one knows she can hear emotions, recalling that even Igor and the villain did not believe her when she was younger. Marcia gives a wry smile, remembering she tried to ignore her ability but was just seen as a lunatic, leaving her nothing more to say about it. Marcia's eyes widen again, a look of surprised curiosity on her face. She focuses on the book, a specific detail catching her attention. Red eyes? The text explains that people with magic power all have red eyes, but among witches' children, only the eye color is inherited, and they often do not inherit the magical power itself. Marcia thinks about Fabian, noting that he has red eyes but no magic, and she heard he cannot use it. The book reveals that if someone is born with magic power, they will certainly be treated as a witch, but if not, they will only be accused of being a witch's child. Marcia looks thoughtful, realizing that Fabian must have experienced a difficult childhood because of this. She gently closes the large book, pondering that it must be hard to find a witch nowadays. Meanwhile, Larissa is shown in a state of quiet repose, and Marcia realizes from meeting Igor that Larissa's mental illness has become so severe that time alone cannot heal it. Marcia gazes out a window, believing that if she can find a witch, Larissa's illness can be cured, and they will know how to help her feel more comfortable. Looking a bit tired but determined, she notes that she only read for a short while, but it is already morning. Marcia observes someone walking outside at this very early hour. Marcia's eyes suddenly widen in recognition, realizing who it is. It is Larissa walking. Near the stable doors, suggest where Larissa might be. Marcia gently opens the stable door, her voice soft as she calls out, asking if Larissa is there. Larissa is seen sleeping peacefully, curled up next to the large horse, looking incredibly sweet. Marcia watches Larissa sleep, a soft smile on her face, thinking how cute she is. Marcia's expression turns thoughtful and a little sad, wondering if Larissa feels lonely when she is not around her often. A darker memory flashes. It has only been 2 months since they escaped the mansion, and before that, Larissa struggled even to leave her room. A gentle hand lovingly strokes Larissa's head, thinking that even without Marcia constantly by her side, Larissa is now able to go wherever she wishes. Larissa is tenderly touching the horse's nose, and Marcia realizes she had no idea Fabian's gift would mean so much. Marcia smiles warmly to herself, feeling truly grateful to Fabian. Marcia then gently embraces Larissa, thinking how truly adorable this child is, and how one simply cannot help but love her. Marcia lovingly cradles her little Larissa, asking why she is sleeping there, and gently telling her she should have slept in her bed. Larissa, with bright, innocent eyes, looks up at Marcia and clearly says, "Its name is Cookie." Marcia's eyes widen, her heart fluttering with a hopeful beat, as she wonders if Larissa is actually talking. Larissa looks back at Marcia with a sweet, sleepy smile, as if still in a dream, asking what Marcia just said. Marcia's eyes sparkle with joyful tears, as she truly cannot believe what she is hearing, even with her own ears. Marcia brings a hand to her face, a clear sign of overwhelming emotion and disbelief. The peaceful calf, now named Cookie, rests comfortably in its stall, bathed in a soft golden light. Larissa looks up with a sweet, shy smile, her new voice clear as she says, "This calf's name is Cookie." Marcia's eyes well up with tears, her heart full, as Larissa softly asks her. Larissa, sitting in the straw with the calf, proudly says the calf's name is Cookie, then softly calls out, "Sister Marcia." Marcia's face is filled with tears of disbelief, wondering if she is dreaming, as she hears Larissa's first words. Larissa smiles sweetly, her voice described as even more beautiful than the voice of mermaids. Marcia's eyes well up with tears again, overcome by the warmth of Larissa's voice. Marcia holds Larissa tightly, filled with emotion, realizing that Larissa has overcome so many tough times. Marcia hugs Larissa close, tears still falling, wondering how she could not love this kind and strong child. Later, two maids in the hallway whisper to each other, wondering where they are going this early morning. Marcia's face shows a hint of worry as she hears the maids talking. A maid looks at Marcia and Larissa with concern, calling out, "Madam!" Sophia, the maid, looks worried, asking Larissa if she can promise to tell her or Marcia in advance whenever she wants to go out, my lady. Sophia looks, telling Larissa it is fine, and she will get her some warm water, while Larissa softly apologizes to Sophia. Larissa looks up with a sweet, apologetic expression, promising she will do that next time. A teacup dramatically falls and breaks, signaling a sudden commotion. Sophia looks shocked and distressed, calling out, "Ah, my lady." Sophia grabs Larissa, her face showing a mix of worry and relief, as if saying, "Finally, you." Marcia is seen in the background, hands clasped, a faint smile on her face, seemingly content. Two maids rush in, asking what happened and if something fell, looking concerned about Lady Larissa. Larissa looks a little confused, while Sophia quickly assures the maids, "No, it's not like that." Larissa, wrapped in a cozy robe, smiles softly and thanks everyone, looking content with a warm drink. Two maids are seen screaming in shock and surprise, their faces contorted with disbelief. The news about Larissa talking spreads quickly, with people whispering that Lady Larissa is able to talk and her voice sounds like an angel's voice. The rumor spreads everywhere, with maids eagerly wanting to bring food to Larissa and others wanting to see her too, leading to playful squabbles. Marcia and Larissa are surprised to see so many people gathered outside the door, all wanting to see Larissa, with Sophia trying to manage them and people asking to see her lady. Sophia stands composed, with cookies and other treats in the background, ready to be served, showing her calm demeanor. Sophia, looking a bit calm, understands everyone is curious, but worries they will bother Larissa if they keep using food as an excuse to visit. She hears a knock and looks annoyed, thinking, "Again?" Sophia angrily tells someone at the door that she has told them many times that if they keep coming here like that, it will bother her lady. But her eyes widen in shock as she realizes who is at the door. Fabian stands calmly at the door, having heard Sophia, and she quickly greets, "Ah, Your Grace." Sophia politely asks Fabian if he can come in, to which he readily agrees and says, "Of course, please come in." Fabian confesses that he actually wanted to run here right after hearing the news. A servant informs another person about what Fabian just said, confirming that Larissa is indeed able to talk. Fabian looks eager and delighted, confirming he wants to see his lady now, saying, "Of course." Fabian pauses, thinking if he comes to see her right now she will be frightened, showing his consideration. Fabian looks thoughtful, realizing it would be better to wait for her to finish her meal. A maid informs Marcia that his grace is here, madam. Fabian's eye sparkles, reflecting the light, as he looks with anticipation. Marcia looks up, surprised but pleased, saying, "Ah, Fabian." Marcia, with a happy and energetic expression, asks Fabian to have a seat, and if he slept well last night, adding, "Just a minute." Marcia politely tells Fabian she is almost done, and he graciously replies to take her time, while she silently thinks his polite speaking is completely different from her action and expressions. Marcia excitedly announces to everyone that her little sister just talked, and Fabian looks surprised, realizing he was wrong about her. Fabian smirks, noting that Marcia herself has not brushed her hair yet since she is busy doing Larissa's hair. Marcia beams with pride and relief, exclaiming happily, "Done, Larissa." Fabian looks down at Larissa, asking if he heard correctly that she named the calf Larissa, and she corrects him softly, saying, "Yes, it's Cookie." Fabian kneels down to Larissa's level, smiling, and tells her, "What a great name! Well done!" He asks if she wants any gift, and she replies she doesn't want any. Larissa says her sister's presence is enough for her. She said she is content with her being alongside, but Marika thinks her life plan was to ship Larissa and the Duke together. But it has completely failed recently. She swears to God that she regrets all by now. Larissa said that she was overjoyed hearing all this. Later that night, Marcia was seen happy that her sister is finally better, so she thought it was unnecessary for her to look out for the mage now. But still, she decided to look out for other therapies. And as also, Fabian had gone through all of it in his life, so it might have been really hard for him, she thought. The next morning, she was moving fast to return the book on the reading room first. Marcia looks determined, believing that what Larissa needs now is something more than what money can buy. Marcia stands by a window, dreaming of Larissa eating well and going out more often. Living freely, Marcia wants Larissa to have more happy memories than the sad time she spent trapped in the basement. Larissa beams with pure joy, and Marcia realizes that after Larissa recovers, she needs to find her own way to survive in this world too. Marcia looks thoughtful, realizing she also needs to find Larissa a reliable tutor. Marcia's face hardens, muttering, "Damn it," as she stops, sensing something. Marcia is surprised, realizing she just heard an inner voice, something she has not heard since the funeral. Marcia remembers hearing such voices every day at the Blick Mansion, but now the atmosphere is much more peaceful. Marcia looks around, thinking the voice must be coming from Fabian's workroom. Marcia looks surprised, wondering if they are talking about business, as she hears a voice ask, "How much more do we have to compromise with that witch's son?" Marcia looks thoughtful, suspecting fraud, but knowing Fabian is not an easy person and can figure things out himself. A man grumbles, thinking, "Darn it, how dare he treats me like that as if I am not his uncle." The man, with a stern look, declares he has to exploit not less than the amount that Lady Conrad did, leaving Marcia wondering, "What?" Marcia is puzzled, thinking, "What does Eloise Conrad have to do with this?" As she sees an image of a woman. Marcia is frustrated that not only did Eloise cause trouble using her fiancé, but Marcia has to hear her name here too. A door bursts open, hinting at a dramatic entry. Marcia stands confidently at the door, holding her book, wondering to what extent Eloise has gotten involved. Fabian's uncle looks shocked and asks, "Where is she?" The two men look surprised as one calls out, "Ma, madam," and wonders, "The Duchess? Her?" Marcia stands calmly at the doorway, apologizing that she forgot to knock on the door, with men seated at a table. Marcia's eye flashes with determination as she thinks, "I have something to say." Fabian's uncle looks flustered, asking if she is having a guest. Marcia looks pleased, crossing her arms and telling someone to take their time while waiting for her to finish. Marcia's eyes hold a mix of intensity and cunning, hinting at her intelligence as she clutches her book. Fabian looks sternly ahead, his expression unreadable. Fabian looks down with a slight smirk, then tells Baron Libella they should continue their talk, startling the Baron. Fabian's uncle laughs nervously, saying that even if she is the Duchess, this is not something she can hear. Fabian looks directly at his uncle, stating clearly, "I have nothing to hide from my wife." Marcia looks surprised, hearing Fabian say she will know it all anyway, so they can continue, leaving her speechless. Marcia looks ready to talk over, hinting that she knows about cars, and she is surprised. The man is revealed to be interested in developing cars, which Fabian invested in. Marcia smiles, feeling a bit proud of herself, thinking Fabian must allow her presence because he believes she can help him. Fabian asks if they understand how much the bastard Ivan embezzled for experiment money. Fabian's uncle grins, explaining that since the mages are originally Ivan's relatives, it is hard to calculate the lost money, and Marcia is surprised, wondering, "Mages?" Marcia looks at her book, thinking, "Aren't mages people who live in seclusion and are hard to find?" Marcia realizes that Baron Libella is the one who would look after Ivan's business, and he is too busy inventing cars to deal with diplomacy. Marcia, seeing a vision of a mage, wonders if he is really a mage and might have connections with witches. Fabian sits at the table, acknowledging that it is difficult to invent new techniques without Ivan. Fabian's uncle looks frantic, with papers flying around, hearing Fabian scold him for misleading statements full of errors. Fabian's uncle nervously admits there is a slight error, but the increase in materials and the price of crude oil and minerals in the Treacherous duchy is true. Fabian looks at his uncle, who explains that the brake equipment is hard to make because they have to continually melt expensive metal. Fabian's uncle, looking desperate, shouts, "Ice tilde! In short, we lack money," and demands the money back. Marcia looks at her book intently, realizing she does not know why, but it seems Eloise had a hand in this. Fabian's uncle, smiling nervously, says Fabian could claim financial difficulties due to investors withdrawing, but there is a reason he cannot say that. Fabian stands silently, and Marcia realizes that day, when the incident happened, Fabian mentioned nothing about Eloise, and she thinks it is time for Eloise to become a help. Marcia wonders if Lady Eloise might come there, thinking if it were not for her inner voice, Eloise might have already appeared. Marcia looks thoughtful, wondering what they talked about, that Fabian could not tell her. Marcia's eye shows a spark of realization, thinking, "Now that I notice," Marcia looks with disgust towards the door, muttering, "That evil demon." Fabian's uncle, with a sly look, thinks, "Just wait till I can play a game with you," indicating a challenge. Marcia looks shocked and angry, her face distorted in rage. Marcia sits on a couch, a roulette wheel above her, realizing, so it's about gambling. Marcia's blood boils at the thought of Belaine, who stole Larissa's tears and gambled all the money away. Marcia, with a stern expression, thinks that Fabian's uncle is also spending the Grand Duke's money on pleasures, specifically addressing Baron Libella. Marcia looks angrily at Fabian's uncle, calling out, "Hey, Baron Libella?" Marcia looks furious, stating she cannot stand hearing that, and vows to expose all his tricks. Marcia is seen angry, crossing her arms, stating that they supplied crude oil for the Grand Duke's business in a duchy as small as the Treacherous duchy. Baron Libella looks completely bewildered, asking, "Pardon?" and wondering to himself, what on earth is she talking about? Marcia looks serious, mentioning the mages and questioning why the amount of metal used increased when it should be melting steadily. Fabian's uncle smiles confidently, thinking the Duchess does not understand technical development, and claims he definitely recorded the usage amount. Marcia, looking sharp, asks him directly, "Why did you not bring it in the first place?" Fabian's uncle sweats, stammering that it was too sudden, then thinks it must be because he was in an urgent situation, while Marcia smirks. Marcia smiles knowingly, stating that large fluctuations in funds and technical development take a lot of time, so it is only possible that he rushed to withdraw the investment before coming. Fabian's uncle looks shocked, wondering, how could she know? As Marcia coolly demands he say it. Fabian's uncle is startled, exclaiming, "What? What are you talking nonsense?" As Marcia suggests, he secretly invested the Grand Duke's money somewhere else, and then suddenly withdrew some. Marcia looks sly, suggesting if not, then maybe the fund of the other party keeps leaking, perhaps for gambling. Fabian's uncle looks flustered, muttering to himself, "Seems to be both." Fabian's uncle awkwardly asks Fabian if it is all right for the Duchess to hear about men's business talk, even if she is the Duchess. Fabian's uncle forces a fake laugh, haha. Fabian smiles, pleased that his wife is not bored but has given him a new idea. He calls out to POTUS, who readily responds, "Yes, Your Grace." He then calls out to Baron Libella, who looks surprised as Fabian holds up a document. Fabian asks Baron Libella if he knows what this is, and the Baron looks shocked, stammering that Fabian, looking intense with glowing red eyes, reveals he already knows about the Baron sneaking into the casino, and states, "This is the proof." Baron Libella looks terrified and starts sweating profusely. Pratt tells him he can read it carefully, revealing all the money he spent in the casino, making the Baron wonder, How come? A roulette table with money and chips is shown. As Fabian explains, he could not find the source of part of the fund, and the amount of money not suitable with the Baron's finances was continuously poured into the casino, making him wonder where that money came from. Fabian asks if he supposes there is another investor, and the Baron frantically denies it, screaming, "Of course no! That's not the truth, Your Grace." Marcia looks on, thinking that the businessman seems too terrified, while Fabian asks if the Baron is saying his wife lied. Baron Libella, smiling slyly, declares he is the exclusive investor, which means that he has the right to mass production, adding, he admits they did have other investors, but now they do not. Marcia looks upset, telling the Baron to say something more properly, as Fabian states that the Grand Duke is the only investor, and so has his right of priority, adding that this is not the time for the Baron to ask for an investment increase. Fabian's eye glows with a powerful, dangerous energy. Before that, Baron Libella recoils in terror, gasping. Fabian's eyes burn with an intimidating red glow as he sternly says, "Let's talk about your breach of contract," making him look like a demon. Fabian dismisses Baron Libella, telling POTUS to see the Baron off, and POTUS acknowledges, "Yes, your grace." POTUS escorts a shaken Baron Libella out of the room. Marcia laughs happily, saying, "Hey, that's right, it's all your fault," looking pleased with Fabian. Fabian looks at Marcia, gently asking, "Marcia, would you like a cup of tea?" Marcia looks contemplative, realizing she did not know Fabian had such knowledge of business structure, and thinks that's because of my ability. Marcia smiles, saying it is just something anyone knows, but then admits, "Not really, I crossed the line." He pours tea, looking at Marcia, confirming that he did suspect there was another investor. Marcia looks surprised, saying, "Ah," and then wonders what she should say, remembering it was mentioned in the contract from the beginning that there is only one investor. Marcia looks nervous, clutching her dress, thinking, "Ace, he will know if he investigates anyway," and wonders about the other investor. Is that Lady Conrad? As Fabian pours tea, Fabian looks at Marcia with a hint of a smile, asking her how she knew, and Marcia remembers hearing it when she was at the opera house, when she met the young Viscount Cleve, even if it is a lie. Fabian's face is flushed, his red eyes wide, showing a surprised and slightly embarrassed expression. Fabian touches his forehead, slightly flustered, apologizing, "My apology. Actually, about Eloise." Fabian looks away, still a bit flustered. Marcia stands near Fabian, saying he wouldn't hide from her, who sips his tea. Fabian's red eyes dart quickly, a sign of his quick thoughts and perhaps a hint of embarrassment. Marcia looks shocked, exclaiming, as Fabian tells her that even if he died, he would not love her like that. Marcia looks away, a bit dejected, as Fabian asks, "And what?" Then he quickly corrects himself. "Ah, nothing. Just that." Marcia looks distressed, realizing Eloise had to hear those cruel words, and then saw Fabian rush out to the balcony to save his wife. In a flashback, Eloise looks heartbroken and screaming, thinking that might be the cruelest rejection, more than hundreds of cold words. Marcia looks at Fabian, slightly confused, asking what brought him to the workroom. Fabian's face flushes, and he looks away, mumbling that he suddenly missed it when passing by. Fabian looks surprised and a little vulnerable, asking, "Miss Ed, me?" Marcia looks at Fabian, wondering if she is mistaken, or if his eyes are sparkling, then says, "Ah, yes." Marcia clarifies that she just dropped by to say hello, and apologizes for not knocking before coming in, as teacups sit on the table. Marcia looks downcast, muttering that it was simply because of her temper, but then says, "Not at all. You helped me a lot." Marcia, with a confident smile, says she blurted out all those things suddenly, but it did help anyway. Marcia explains that a seatbelt fixes the driver and passengers in the seat, keeping them still during sudden stops, and Fabian agrees, saying he will do as she says. Fabian looks thoughtful, his eyes sparkling slightly, as he says, "Then, please excuse me," indicating he is leaving. Marcia stops mid-step, hearing Fabian call out, "Marcia, wait." Marcia turns, a questioning look on her face, asking, "Yes?" Fabian's hand reaches out, holding Marcia's forgotten book, telling her, "You forgot your book." Marcia looks surprised and a little panicked, realizing her mistake. Marcia looks flustered, thinking, this, and panics, thinking, "Big deal. Why can't I let Fabian see the book about witches?" Fabian holds the book, his expression unreadable, making Marcia nervous. Fabian extends the book towards Marcia, asking her, "Don't you take it?" Fabian glances away, thinking something private. Marcia looks alarmed, rushing forward and crying, "Wait, Fabian!" She looks distraught, explaining that if he just leaves like that, there will be a misunderstanding between them, and she wonders what he thought when he saw this book. Fabian turns his back, his face hidden, and asks Marcia, "And what did you think about when you saw it?" Marcia looks frustrated, realizing he keeps silent. Fabian looks at Marcia, his expression serious, saying that if they do not talk, she might be hurt because she guesses things herself, then asks, "If we talk?" Marcia looks away, her face showing worry, admitting, "You might be hurt because of my words." Fabian looks calmly at Marcia, a slight smile on his face. Fabian looks at Marcia, asking, "What?" Then firmly states, "I'll tell you the truth." Marcia looks thoughtful, as Fabian explains he was thinking of Larissa while reading this book, and she knows her condition. Larissa is shown looking peaceful but slightly sad, and Fabian explains that even though she is clearly recovered, she still has many painful memories in her heart. Fabian continues, revealing that if Larissa's room is too dark, she cannot sleep, and she trembles when she hears a loud noise, still having nightmares like before. Marcia holds her book, looking at Fabian with understanding, saying, "Fabian, I know you have been going through a tough time because of your bloodline." Fabian's face is still, a silent acknowledgement of her words. Marcia walks closer, looking determined, saying she does not want to pretend that she does not know the path that can help Larissa. Marcia and Fabian reach for each other's hands, their fingers almost touching, creating a tender moment. Marcia takes Fabian's hand, looking into his eyes, saying she wants to know more about him. Marcia looks at Fabian, her eyes wide with earnestness, telling him, "Even on contract, I'm your wife." Fabian looks surprised, a blush on his face, his heart beating soft. Fabian looks astonished, his heart racing, as he thinks, and remembers Marcia offering to help him, which she confirms, "You did." Marcia looks down at her book, her expression serious, stating that even if she finds a witch, there is no guarantee that Larissa can be treated. Fabian looks away, his face showing concern, explaining that even if Larissa can be treated, if the truth spreads, it would be difficult for Marcia to escape criticism, but then he reconsiders. Even so, Marcia looks directly at Fabian, holding her book firmly. Fabian looks at Marcia with a slight, knowing smile. Marcia and Fabian stand close, looking at the bright view outside the window, and Marcia says, "I'll help you." On the other side, Larissa gently strokes Cookie's head, showing their deepening bond. Larissa looks delighted, playfully exclaiming, "Phew, Cookie tilde. You seem to be bigger." Larissa leans against Cookie, softly saying she also wants to grow up quickly like him. Larissa smiles sweetly, her eyes shining, saying she could not hear anything before, but now there are warm sounds everywhere. Larissa and Marcia are shown in flashback, and Larissa thinks that because she never heard her voice, she would like to suggest that the first voice she heard was Marcia's. Larissa laughs happily as Cookie licks her face, saying, "Hee hee, it's really amazing. That was the first time I heard that saying." A hand gently places a gingerbread toy beside Cookie, inviting it to look. Larissa holds the gingerbread toy, smiling at Cookie, and proudly declares, "Its name is Cookie too. My sister made it for me." Marcia thinks about her and looks tenderly at Larissa, telling her, "I will be by your side until you grow up." Larissa smiles softly, a look of contentment on her face. Marcia smiles happily as she stands with Fabian and the maids, declaring, "I didn't know that this world is filled with so many beautiful sounds." Marcia and Larissa ride horses together under a bright sky, and Larissa wishes she could grow up faster so they can run together. Larissa smiles brightly, full of confidence, saying, "Because I'm her younger sister, I can do it."